Noting the time and the presence of quorum, I'd like to bring this December 5th, 2022 meeting, the Acton Select Board, to order. I believe the chair of the FinCom wants to bring his meeting to order as well.
Thank you, Mr. Charter. I will also, noting a quorum, bring to order the Acton Finance Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We will begin the meeting as we usually do, hearing residents' concerns. Seeing none, we'll move ahead. Mr. Manager, your update.
One.
Got one? Okay. Matt, you let our one virtual commenter in?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just did call in user. You should be able to speak. Just let us know who you are or your call.
Hi, it's Tara from MassApp, and I just was hoping to find out if you're going to let people comment on the open space and recreation plan item and the that specifically. I also want to comment that the 250 committee, I hope that the remaining positions are reserved for people with a background in advocating for Indigenous rights and or people of Indigenous descent. And that I want to, I hope that you all will publish public hearing information in the Action Unlimited, like other towns are doing. I think it's the most accessible way to reach the most people, and it's free, doesn't require a firewall or give the beacon your private information. And then I would like I hope that you guys can allow remote participation by the public on an ongoing basis, on a permanent basis. I feel like it's more democratic and involves more people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Manager.
Good evening. I will reserve most of my talking for the presentation I'm doing later. I do want to note that we have some folks that are retiring from the organization at the end of the year, which I'll announce and recognize at a later date. But one in particular who is here with you tonight to present is Brian McMullen, our Assistant Finance Director, Principal Assessor. Will be retiring at the end of the calendar year. So tonight, his tax classification presentation will be his last and best.
Thank you. Comment, member minutes? Yes, Imogen.
Hi, yes, I just wanted to make a note that we did receive an email from a concerned resident over one of the 250 committee appointments, and I was wondering whether, first, if that letter could be put into the public record as was requested, and two, if we can have an agenda item listed on this for a future select board meeting to talk about it more, but wanted to formally acknowledge that and wanted to get your thoughts, Mr. Chair.
So I think it's important that that we not get into a situation where we're attempting personal attacks on any member of the community who volunteers to serve on a committee. And I would also observe that in my years of town service, I think it's unprecedented where we've attempted to reconsider an appointment that was made unanimously by the entire board. Mr. Martin.
So this might be a little bit of a special case. This person has social media posts advocating the overthrow of the U.S. government and military violence against the United States. Excuse me, military violence against the United States.
Right.
happen to be in agreement with Himija and David. I was going to actually read the letter tonight. I wanted to go into public record and not to do, have a witch hunt, but it is hate speech and it's not inclusive. And I don't know what the rules are of committees, but I don't think that the 250th is a celebration and it should be as such.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I think you're engaging in a discussion on an item which is not on the agenda.
Yes, we are, and we're about to put a stop to that. Thank you.
Can I say one more thing? I was actually going to amend the agenda tonight at the point of new business, just as a heads up.
Mr. Manager, comments?
On that particular discussion, no, other than that appointments to the committee discussing appointments to the committee is on the agenda tonight under consent agenda. I can't find it, but I know it's on there. So just so you know, that's where a discussion like that could take place.
So I agree that appointing certain individuals to the 250 committee is indeed on the agenda. However, I suspect the person you wish to speak about is not listed on the agenda. And I would find it totally inappropriate to bring this up. It's not on the agenda. And to bring it up without notifying the individual involved. If it's the wish of the board to bring this onto a future agenda, we could certainly do that. And I think that we could have a much more full-bodied discussion of not only the individual, but the process. And I think it's important that we make sure that the individual involved be properly notified so that they could make whatever responses they wish to. And also, any other members of the public could make any comments. So I'm going to ask the town manager to, when we discuss our agenda for our next meeting on the 19th, we might be able to include it at that point. Jim.
Oh, yeah, okay, the microphone. On a different topic. I wanted to acknowledge and mourn the loss of Phil Keyes. He was one of the longest-serving members of the Land Stewardship Committee, part of the original founding group, and only recently, at the age of 64, left the committee to move on to retirement. He loved and cared for the Spring Hill Conservation Area for over 2 decades. During that time, he also served as the executive director of the New England Mountain Biking Association, and he brought deep experience about trail design to the committee that really transformed our ability to make all-purpose trails. He was hit by a car on Great Road at the end of October while he was riding his motorcycle. And he died 2 weeks later from the injuries sustained in that collision, and I will miss him. Different note. So we did get a letter this week asking about people getting phone calls from people claiming to be part of the Acton Police Department doing fundraising. And it was really helpful to hear that John was able to confirm that the local police association does its fundraising through mail. So any phone call you receive claiming to come from the Acton Police Department doing fundraising, you can safely ignore it. I think that's it. I have similar things to say about the letter we got about the 250 committee, but I don't think I have anything to add at this point.
Thank you. Other comments? Fran?
On another note, I just wanted to say how moving the ceremony, the Court of Honor ceremony, I attended for the Eagle Scouts, Nick Terry and Vijay Sundarapandayan. I had never been to one of those before, and it was a great experience to see the evolution of these young men as, small, tenderfoot to all the way up to Eagle Scout. I just really enjoyed the ceremony.
Thank you. Other comments? The only update that I have is I believe that the West Acton Village Stroll was postponed. It was supposed to be last Saturday. It was postponed due to rain. I believe it's coming up on this coming Saturday. Looks like a good event. I know Julie Pierce will be back here to do a presentation. We can confirm that date with her. Seeing no other comments, let's move ahead with our tax classification hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Select Board. So I just want to introduce here to my left, Ellie Anderson. She's the latest member of the Finance Department. She is our Financial Solutions Analyst, and we're pleased to have Ellie here, and she actually volunteered to assist me tonight, so I appreciate her assistance. So tonight's tax classification hearing, let me introduce the Board of Assessors first. So next slide, Ellie. So for those that aren't familiar with the Board of Assessors, it's a 3-member committee currently with 2 associate positions that are unfilled, but currently the chair is Carol Leipner-Shrebnick. And then we also have Susan Miller on the board and Mr. Leo Fochman, who is sitting here behind me. And then myself, Brian McMullen, the principal assessor, obviously presenting tonight's tax classification hearing. So next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the agenda. So what is a tax classification hearing? That's going to be a portion of this discussion this evening. And then also, we're going to give you some of the highlights of the property valuation changes from last year, fiscal 22, to this year. Now, we just got certification with State Department of Revenue November 30th. So, and then there's 4 critical votes that the Select Board need to take this evening that this hearing will introduce and discuss. And the first one would be adoption of a residential factor. And so a residential factor of 1 would result in a uniform tax rate. Anything less than a residential factor of 1 would actually be shifting the tax burden from the residential class to the CIP, the commercial, industrial, personal property. And then the second would be whether to adopt an open space discount, and we'll talk about this some more, and whether to adopt a residential exemption, and whether to adopt a small commercial exemption. So what is the tax classification hearing? So it's a public hearing required by state law that needs to be held, basically to help assist the Board of Selectmen with the necessary decisions that need to be made and whether we should shift the tax burden to the CIP classes from the residential sector, and then whether we should adopt any of the other types of exemptions. But really, the main focus here is there is 4 main classes of property. That's the residential, the commercial, the industrial, and the personal property. So Massachusetts general law requires that the assessors get our certification of values every year. So as I had mentioned, this took place on November 30th last week. So what does this entail? Well, for instance, for this fiscal year, fiscal 23, I had to use calendar 21 sales to determine these assessed values. So we're following the market. We don't set the market, we're just following the market. State Department of Revenue analyzes all my data. They analyze the sales. they actually will go through the MLS listings themselves and check for accuracy and so on and so forth. So it can be fairly detailed. And then the whole idea here is to make sure that my property assessments are reflective of full and fair cash value, 100% of market value. And so that's the objective. So again, the valuations were certified November 30th, so that's the critical part. Now we can hold this public hearing and then take the votes tonight and get our tax rate set. So getting into some of the financial data, or the valuation data. So this one's always kind of critical to look at. So if you look at the first class of property, SFR, single-family residence, so that's our average single-family residence. Last year for fiscal '22 was $665,000 and change. This year it's $776,000. Probably not too surprising to most of you here in the room, as you've seen sales in your neighborhood kind of skyrocket and really kind of get crazy over the last, 12 to 24 months. So there's a difference of $110,000 or 16.65% increase in that single family value this year. Moving along the line, the average commercial property last year was $1,028,135. This year it's $1,104,141, so about a 7.39% increase. The average industrial, again, $1,028,000, very similar to the average commercial. Didn't go up quite as much as the commercial, but it went up 6.19%. And then last is the personal property accounts. $179,338 last year. This year it's $201,000 with a difference of $21,000 or 12.19%. Now the personal property account, really the bulk of that valuation is the public utilities. That's where you're going to find Boston Gas, Boston Edison, the telecommunications companies, and so on and so forth. They make up probably for 90% of that personal property valuation. So let's take a look at the average single-family residential tax bill with a proposed uniform rate this year compared to last year, just for talking purposes. So in FY22, that value was $665,787. We had a rate of $19.45. That average bill was $12,950. This year, that assessment is now going to $776,650. With a proposed rate, again, apples to apples comparison, $17.56, with an average bill of $13,638. That bill is going up approximately $688. So if you look in that last column on the right-hand side, percent change, so you look at the valuation, so your valuation's going up 16%, your tax rate's coming down almost 10%. It's because the valuation outpaced the increase in the budget and the operations from last year to this year that was presented at town meeting back in May. So the average tax bill in this particular case is going up 5.31%. So let's look at an average commercial property in comparison. So last year's average commercial property was $1,028,190. Again, same uniform rate, $19.45, with an average tax bill of $19,998. The proposed value this year is $1,101,000, or its certified value, $1,104,141, with a proposed rate, again, a uniform rate, $17.56, with a tax bill of $19,389. So the delta, in this case, it's actually going down, $609. So again, if you look at the valuation, that's going up 7.39%, but the tax rate, again, is coming down 9.71, everything being equally compared, apples to apples. So the tax bill in this particular case for an average commercial property is going down just over 3%. So vote number one, the adoption of a residential factor. So this basically, and if you look at a lot of communities, they have split tax rates. And that's how you derive at a split tax rate, by shifting the residential tax burden from the residential class to the CIP classes. So again, doing this, you would select a residential factor of less than 1 to do that shift. So this is something that's important to keep in mind. Again, I can tell you historically in the past, the select board has not adopted a residential factor of less than 1 in 20-somewhat years. It was done many, many years ago. Again, that adoption of that residential factor will result in a uniform rate. Next slide, Ellen. So what would it look like if we shifted and we adopted something less than a factor of 1? So on the left-hand side here, you have the average single-family valuation compared to the right-hand side of an average commercial valuation. So let's just say we have a uniform rate of the 1756, and that average tax bill for a single-family home is $16.38. And you can see some different scenarios that play out here, a 5% change, a 10% change, or a 20. So let's look at the 20. So if we adopt a residential factor that's less than 1, that results in a 20% shift, then that residential tax bill would be going down $303. So they would have that type of savings for the year. Now let's look at the commercial valuation. So if you look at the commercial valuation last year, they paid a tax bill of $19,339. So in a 20% shift, so because if you shifted from the residential at 20%, then the commercial property would have to pick up that change. Their bill's going up $3,925. So just a small shift from the residential, 303, it's increasing the average commercial by almost a factor, well, more than a factor of 10. So it's a pretty significant change. So vote number 2. So vote number 2 is an adoption of a open space discount. Well, we just got certification last week with State Department of Revenue, and we have no properties that are classified as open space. And frankly, if any properties we do have, they're either town-owned or they're already in other programs. But right now, we have no properties classified as open space. So vote number 3 is adoption of a residential exemption. So this takes the average residential properties in town, that's including everything, single-family homes, condominiums, apartments, and so on and so forth, divided by the number of parcels. It's about $667,000. So up to 35% of that value, you're basically doing an internal shift within the residential class. So up to 35% of that, you would take that off that bottom half of that, and they would get a savings up to 35%, and then it would be borne by the remainder of the commercial class. So basically, anything less than the average would be paying less. Everything greater than the average would be paying more, kind of an internal shift. We've never adopted this. It's very complicated to implement. In fact, I just lost my thought. The whole idea, I guess, behind this, it's not means tested. The basis is just the pure valuation of the property. We have several programs in the assessor's office where they're means tested, which we think is the true exemption. This is just a allocation shift of the levy within the class. But we have various programs, and last year we had over 200 plus citizens that received various types of property tax exemptions, which we think are very beneficial, and they're very specific. They're means tested, so those that are deserving are benefited from it, and those that may not necessarily, not that they're not deserving, we're all deserving, but they may not be in a situation of need where they might be getting a benefit like this, and they don't need it. So we believe that's really the focus. Last year, we granted over $625,000 of property tax exemptions, and that's kind of where the assessors and myself are kind of focused and trying to steer people in that direction. So vote number 4 is adoption of a small commercial exemption, similar to the residential exemption. The Department of Workforce and Development provides the assessors with a list of properties that could potentially be eligible every year. And what I mean by that is they have 10 or less employees, and frankly, the valuation can't exceed $1 million. Now, the valuation can't exceed $1 million. It doesn't necessarily have to be owned by that entity. It could be that they're leasing it, they're the lessee and the lessor. But nevertheless, that property can't exceed $1 million. Now, if it's a property with multiple tenants and multiple businesses, every single one of those businesses would have to be eligible. If one of them is not eligible, then that business is discounted and it would not be eligible and wouldn't benefit from it. Again, they call it an exemption. It's just a shift within the commercial industrial class. In this particular case, the personal property is not impacted by it. They're off on their own. So it only reduce those commercial industrial properties, and then it would be borne by those commercial and property, commercial and industrial properties. So it's a internal shifting of the tax levy. Again, we've never adopted this in the past. We think it's very difficult to implement and hard to really see what the benefits are. Frankly, we think that there's nothing out there that would force the lessor to pass on this to the lessee. And so frankly, again, we just don't think it's a good choice, if you would. And frankly, if you look back at the data, we see the average commercial properties tax bills going down $300 this year. So I guess, ultimately, in the long run, I think that the idea here is to try to stay with a uniform tax rate if we could this year and adopt none of these exemptions, as we think they'd be very difficult to implement. And I think right now, with the economic climate and with the valuation changes right now, I think we should stay as status quo and just move forward. And any questions?
Questions from members of the board? Imogen.
Thank you. That was a very insightful presentation. One quick question: with the exemptions that you listed, are those exemptions that the state offers, or that's a possibility? Who determines these exemptions is the question.
So I just want to make sure I'm getting this question correct, Imogen. So the exemptions in the presentation, or the exemptions I said the Board of Assessors?
The exemptions mentioned in the presentation.
Yeah, so this is state law. It is. So these are offered throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Every community has to go through this same presentation and identify these potential exemptions that you could adopt. In fact, it's a good point, because thank you very much for bringing that up. And we were just looking at some data earlier this evening, and I think last year there was only 6 or 7 communities that adopted the residential exemption and 6 or 7 that adopted the small commercial exemption. And I think, again, because I think they're very hard to administer to, and I'm not sure if there's a real benefit there, to be honest with you.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Other questions from the Select Board? Questions from the Finance Committee?
Anyone? Mr. Noon.
Yeah, Brian, that was your best. What's the current split between residential and CIP total?
Yeah, so right now, I think, and I brought that, Steve, I believe, but off the top of my head, it's about a 90-10 split. So we keep getting away from, obviously it's a residential community, and that sector is really the driving force in town. If you look at the data that we presented this evening, with the single-family home going up, 16, 17%, commercial, industrial, 7, 8, 9% on average. So they're grabbing a bigger bite.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Questions from the public?
Just what percentage of the tax base is residential?
What percent?
What percentage of the tax base is residential?
90.
Meaning, what's the split?
90%,
90%. Okay. Thank you. Oh, on my calendar.
Any other questions from the?
Ann Chang, South Acton. I'm a member of the EDC, and the EDC has worked long and hard, like 20 years ago, to have a uniform tax rate to protect businesses in town, and I hope that you continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, I believe we have 2 folks who raised their hands out in the audience. Could you let one in, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I believe this is Tara from earlier, whether they could confirm and let us know where they're from.
Hi, yes, Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry to have to ask Brian the same question that I seem to always ask, but I can never remember the answer. So there's two questions. So if you change if you give the small businesses a discount or whatever, the larger businesses pay for that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
It doesn't come out of the residents. I would like very much for us to explore that so that the very small businesses can get subsidized effectively from the CVSs of the world. And then, what would be and then my second question is, can you give us an example or a range of the tax reduction that one of these small businesses could effectively get if they play their cards correctly and the landlord, agreed to give it to them? But just give us an idea of how many zeros we're talking about. Is it $1,000 a year? Is it $10,000 a year? How much do you think the impact would be?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if we went the maximum 10% on $1 million property, it's $100,000 evaluation with a proposed rate of $17.56. So you're talking $1,756 per eligible business or parcel. And so that parcel.
If that parcel has like 5 businesses, you split it 5 ways if the landlord gives it up. Is that what you're saying? So it's a number of $100 a year?
I didn't hear you, Tara.
So we probably $1 million parcel might have 5 businesses renting, and then they split it 5 ways if the landlord actually gives it up. Is that the kind of range that we're talking about?
So if there's 5 businesses, does that benefit get split up between the 5 businesses if the landlord decides to do that?
And here.
That's entirely up to the lessor, whether they would pass that benefit on to the lessee. So if let's say there's 6 businesses and we round it to $1,800, then those businesses would benefit by $300 each.
A year. Thank you so much.
Okay, Matt, second caller.
Michael Charles?
Me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great, thank you. That was a great analysis, I appreciate it. I'm just wondering, when you talk about residential taxes, it seems like there's basically 2 groups in town. There's, just like my wife Helena and I, we moved in 1992 and we raised kids here and we benefited enormously from the great school system, and our kids have moved on since then, and they've become very successful. And we had no problems paying taxes back then. But now we're retirees, and we're on fixed incomes. So the really rapid increase in town taxes, more than 3 times since 1992, is starting to really have a bite. And I'm wondering, has there ever been any attempt in the analysis to divide residential into either people who have kids in schools or people who don't anymore and are on a fixed income? That's my question. Thanks.
I think I understood your question, Michael, but right now, presently, under Massachusetts general law, there's no provisions to exempt, those that are retirees or those that are beyond the working class, as far as a permanent fix in the tax base, so that they have a fixed amount or it's limited. Frankly, those folks in the past that had school-age kids and had retired and settled in here, they were kind of in the same position. So right now, Massachusetts general law does not recognize kind of across-the-board exemption for those on fixed incomes or retirees. I highly encourage you to actually come in and speak with the assessors or go on to the town's website. We have a pretty pretty extensive brochure there that outlines many, many of the property tax exemptions, which a lot of citizens are taking advantage of. One specifically, which I want to mention, which is a very good program and very new to the town that we've implemented a few years ago, is a circuit breaker application. So for those folks that have been filing the circuit breaker with their state income tax, could potentially file it with the Board of Assessors and get, on an average, I think, reduction over the last 4 or 5 years, about $2,500 reduction in their tax bill. Very successful program, a very easy form to fill out. We'd be happy to walk through it with you and sit down and even look at some of the other programs. But I encourage you to at least come talk to us, or at least investigate the programs that are out there now, because we want to help.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I wasn't really talking about an exemption. I'm just wondering if people on fixed incomes could get a reduced tax percentage. But that's good information, and I'll follow up on it. Thank you.
Mr. Gowing.
I'll do it properly this time. Mike Gowing, 93 Harris Street. I just, to the board, I know the sense of trying to lighten the tax burden on homeowners in town is going to be very, very strong. I would recommend that if you shift it to the businesses, many of those businesses are rental properties who will indeed pass that on to their renters. And right now we're in the midst of a rental crisis in this state. So I just urge you not to penalize the people who are least likely to be able to do anything about it. So, thank you.
Okay. So I would like somebody to move first that we adopt a residential factor. And the motion should be, motion to adopt a residential factor of 1.0, resulting in a uniform tax rate of $17.56. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion is passed. Number 2, adopt an open space discount. I would accept a motion to not adopt an open space discount.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor of the proposed motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Motion was to not adopt an open space discount. Next, adopt a residential exemption. Proposed motion not to adopt a residential exemption.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Jim?
Just wanted to emphasize what Mike had said and Brian had said, that we have programs to reduce people's taxes, and they're not there as a charity. They're there as a policy choice. The town of Acton has a compelling interest in keeping people in town who live here, longer than, the moment their kids graduate from school. And so I just encourage everyone who is, looking at difficult taxes to please go ahead and look at the website, come in and talk to the assessor's office. It helps us achieve goals we have for Acton in terms both of financial goals and a goal of creating residential the connections between people, have a deeper social fabric by having people live here longer. I think that is the right way to go, rather than trying to use one of these underused programs, exemptions, for a good reason.
Thank you. Other comment? All in favor of the proposed motion to not adopt a residential exemption, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passed to not adopt a residential exemption. And 4, adopt a small commercial exemption. Accept a motion to not adopt a small commercial exemption.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor of the motion to not adopt a small commercial exemption, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion is to, approved is to not adopt a small commercial exemption. Thank you. And Brian, before you get down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need to run downstairs and get kind of a form that kind of codifies your votes, and I just need your signature on it, so I'm going to go grab that and bring it back up, if that's okay.
We will do, but while I'm thinking of this,
Thank you.
I want to thank you not only for your service to this board and the previous boards, but also all the years that of hard service you put in for the town. I know from personal experience what a great coworker you are and have been in the past, and how much we'll miss you. And I've always considered you a friend, and I will continue to consider you a friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Appreciate it. It's, if I could just take one minute here. This was a bittersweet decision, and it was very difficult. I really, I'm here for the people. And if anybody that knows me, I'm a people person, and the one thing I enjoyed was helping people. And I think as a community, that's what we do. And I took a lot of pride in helping seniors and getting them tax relief and sitting down with them one-on-one. Nothing made me more happier than doing that and seeing smiles on their face and knowing, because many of them came to me after and said, you know what, Brian, we couldn't stay here if it wasn't for you and the Board of Assessors and the town's generosity, because this is a town commitment. We had a non-binding resolution in the year 2000. Where we brought the town meeting, and that resolution, for those that remember, said, be kind and generous to our citizens with property tax relief and the programs we have. Now the state has fixed programs where I can't go beyond those lines, but we have other programs where we developed and have adopted where we can, and it's at the discretion of the board. So nothing has been, more near and dear to me than being able to help people on fixed incomes and stay in their homes and assist them. Means a lot to me in all your support. And I really, 30 somewhat years goes by quick. And, but it has been great. I really appreciate all your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Notice of public hearing. The Acton Select Board will hold a public hearing on December 5th, 2022 at 7:10 p.m., continued from November 21st, 2022, in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room 204 at the Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, and virtually actonma.gov/meeting/BOS on the application of BWC Colesbrook LLC for a site plan special permit under zoning bylaw section 10.4 at 100 Discovery Way for an energy storage facility. Application materials and how to participate remotely are available online and at Acton Town Hall, http://acton-ma.gov/ds-web/view/collection-15376. The applicant is requesting a continuance to December 19th, 2022 at 7:10 p.m. Could I have a motion to approve the continuance until December 19th, 2022 at 7:10 p.m.?
I move to continue the hearing for special permit 7/12/2022-487 to December 19th, 2022 at 4:10 p.m. in this place.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Just to be clear, did I say 4:10? I meant 7:10. Sorry, bad me.
Okay. All right. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, continued until 7:10 PM on December 19th. Thank you very much. New and special business, economic outlook presentation, Economic Development Director Julie Pierce.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to present kind of an economic snapshot of the town from fiscal year '22. And just to set the context, economic growth increases a town's capacity to provide public services. So it's important to understand the size of your community, the needs in your community, and the status of the economy. When a municipality is equipped with more resources, they can meet these needs better. One of my goals is to do this analysis every year. So Acton, like every other community in fiscal year 22, started off a little bit dampened by the pandemic, but overall we weathered the storm well. In the past 10 months that I've been here, the two specific challenges that kind of have emerged as a recurring theme are the lack of wastewater management options and the way inflation has slowed consumer spending. So both of these things impact the capacity of businesses to locate here and to grow and to thrive. A few other noteworthy trends: the town's population is increasing slowly, but it's increasing year over year. Residential development is outpacing commercial development. And I just want to note a couple things that the town does exceptionally well as a service provider. One is the schools, of course. But another one that's really important to think about in terms of economic development is that we are a source of highly skilled workers. So when companies are located here, they know they can find the employees that they need to get the work done, to continue innovating, and to continue leading. Additionally, my office has started a number of initiatives to help the business community. And in the process of talking to so many business owners, I've identified kind of the four biggest needs. The first one you guys addressed tonight, maintaining a uniform tax rate. Second is making deliberate improvements on the digital and physical infrastructure of the town. Third would be updating the bylaws so that they can reflect doing business in this modern environment. And then finally, adopting long-range guidance principles relevant to economic development. You can go to the next slide. I wanted to just give you a quick visual snapshot of some of the economic growth here in Acton. First off, we have a lot of new businesses. First, we could start near the beginning of the calendar year. We had Acton Asian Market open, going all the way through the year. Just about 6 weeks ago, we had KJ's Cafe open. In addition to new businesses opening, we have some businesses that are thriving so much that they're expanding their operations. So a few to name specifically are Insulet, Weco, Bees Knees British Imports, and Borges Martial Arts. All of those needed more space because they're just doing so well. Another thing to note is how the town's been able to partner, for example, with Acton Housing Authority to develop underutilized properties and then provide housing to seniors, people with low income, and people with disabilities. And then finally on this slide, you can see some of the infrastructure projects. So Kelly's Corner, the long anticipated Kelly's Corner construction, and then all the sidewalks that have been put in this year, the crosswalk systems, and more. So there's a lot going on here in Acton. And you can go to the next slide. So what type of data help us understand the economy? First off is just understanding the population, which we already covered. Next, you'd look at the overall number of businesses, the retail vacancy rate, the makeup of the tax base. So here in Acton, we have approximately 659 businesses. The retail vacancy rate is starting to trend down. It's at 9% now. As you heard earlier, our tax base is a 90-10 split, 90% residential. Shoring up that 10% needs a lot of attention and work. Next, you can look at how the adults in town are doing in terms of employment. So if you look at the chart that's in the bottom left, you can see the unemployment rate of the state as a whole and specifically of the town of Acton. So you can see that compared to the state, Acton has lower unemployment and it's trending even lower. We have less than half the average unemployment. Next, you can look at how much actual building is happening. So in the center bottom, you see the building permits. So just a key takeaway there, you can see that the commercial permits pulled are less than 10% of those pulled for residential. And then another thing to look at is what's going on in the real estate market. So on both sides, you can see an increase in sales compared to the prior year. And so your kind of takeaway from that bottom right chart is just that there's a high demand to be here in Acton, whether it's residential or commercial. And then finally, you can examine how much is coming in taxes. And as you can see, the total amount increased even though the tax rate went down because total valuations went up. So similar scenario to what Brian just went over. So in conclusion, I just want to say that the town policies, both from the select board and at town meeting, they really do affect the economy of the town. And I highly recommend that the select board adopt a goal relevant to economic development every year with the long-term strategic planning. Any questions?
David?
Thank you, Julie. What is a good retail vacancy rate? You know, what rate would it be? I assume it can never be zero, but is 3% good, 5% good?
I think it's 4% off the top of my head. That's the number I remember, but I can look it up too and get back to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions from the select board? Imogen?
Hi, yes. Really enjoyed that presentation. Thank you. I think two quick questions. One is, I was wondering if you could go into more detail on the vacant storefront district approval and what that is. And then the second question was, you mentioned that stormwater management was one of the issues of concern for some of our businesses here. And I was wondering if there were any more details shared by them as to what specifically they were concerned about. Mm-hmm.
So the first one, the vacant storefront program, is a state initiative, and basically it allows a city or town to put aside some funds that would be matched by the state, and then you can use that as a recruitment mechanism to bring businesses in. So here in Acton, we put, I believe it's $10,000 aside. The state's going to match that. So when we have a retail store owner go into a storefront that's been vacant for 12 or more months, then they can apply for a refundable tax credit in that amount. So for us, my goal is to do 2 projects, so 2 business owners would get this $10,000 refundable tax credit. And then your second question, so it's not stormwater, it's wastewater solutions. And so an example of that would be, say, if a gym wanted to come in and open, the kind of gym that might have amenities such as a shower or a sauna or even a pool or, all of the above. They need higher water capacity than the various commercial properties that have vacancies right now can offer. Another example would be a full-service restaurant. So the type of restaurant that might be maybe more upscale but have like a full-service bar, lots of seating. They also can be really limited, even if there's a vacancy in a plaza, for example. One way you might want to think about it is, say you have a commercial plaza based on their wastewater system, they'll have a certain amount of capacity. And so say there's space for 4 businesses, if 3 are there and 1 is empty, you would look at how much the existing businesses are using, subtract that use from the total available, and then whatever's left, it's what's left for that new business to come in. So if a new business is looking at a vacant space and they find out there's not sufficient wastewater capacity for their proposed use, they can't go in there, even if they felt, oh, but this space would be perfect for me. They wouldn't be allowed to. So that's just an example.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Jim? Yes, please.
Hi, Julie. That was a great presentation. I learned a lot. I had a couple of thoughts. So some types of businesses really help Acton and its residents in a lot of ways. Some businesses, maybe not so much. They either have impacts that are negative or only serve a very tiny percentage of the town or whatever. So I'm really looking forward, as your time here continues, to have you work with the EDC to develop a business, an economic development plan that helps us prioritize what kind of businesses Acton, most needs, and which, are less critical or even undesirable. That'd be great to be able to see. Let's see, what else? When you mentioned wastewater, I just want to make sure that as you talk to businesses about it, that we understand that some wastewater solutions, for example, a sewer, cost, every business and residents in that new expanded district a lot of money. And that's part of why the West Acton sewer expansion didn't go through, because it was going to raise costs for everyone so much that they said, yeah, it might be nice, but this is too much. So I would hate to have to push for a wastewater solution that would, penalize even existing businesses with extra costs. The other note on that was, you mentioned KJ's Cafe. I just wanted to put in a plug for that for those that haven't been there. Great place in the little, Trader Joe's Mall, which I know has a better name than Trader Joe's Mall, but that one.
Okay.
It's lots of seats, lots of room, good food, good coffee, and they were able to do that within the existing, wastewater capacity there. So that is possible for good, important businesses that deal with food to come into Acton, even on Great Road, even without, new wastewater solutions. That's it. The only other thing I'd mention, since you talked about the highly educated workforce in Acton and how that helps businesses, the flip side of that is businesses like Hart's are having a harder and harder time finding workers because they have to bring them in from farther and farther away. We don't have enough housing for the people that work in our non-professional jobs in Acton. So I'm glad you mentioned the affordable housing that's happening, but we need a lot more of that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And I just wanted to say that, one, I appreciate the plug for KJ's. They want everyone to know they're open. On the wastewater solutions, yes, definitely. There's sometimes a business can go in, and yes, there is a cost associated with it. So it's like one of these things that always has to be weighed, and I think it's important for people to also understand that whenever a choice is made not to do that, so for example, not to sewer, that's also making a choice that in whatever area doesn't have sewers, you're going to get a higher mix of businesses that use less water. And that's the choice that people are making. So, so less gyms, more car dealerships, right? That's the choice. Yeah.
Thank you. Comments or questions from the Finance Committee?
wanted to thank Julie for your presentation. And on the flip side, it is frustrating. Oh, and Jim, by the way, it's the Brookside Shops.
Thank you.
That mall. As a Realtor, wearing my Realtor hat, trying to place a business on Great Road when they are limited to the wastewater. So that is a frustration.
Finance Committee comments.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I'll kick off if you don't mind. Regarding the commercial property sales 2020 to 2021, do you have an opinion of whether that increase in commercial property sales is indicative of new businesses that are about to join our community? Is that generally an indicator?
That's interesting. That remains to be seen. I really think that increase in sales has more to do with the increased valuation of real estate and, commercial property owners saying, I think now's my time to get out for higher profits.
Okay. Any other members with questions? Roland.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to see more businesses like Insulet going where they're high tech, and I think that's something that's great for our community, and we're lucky to have them. Also, like you got the new car dealership that's on 2A too as well, and you get a rug store that went in, things like that. So you're seeing business activity, and you're seeing new businesses pop up, and hopefully it's sustainable. I mean, a bunch of years ago, Alpha Cars had whatever property they bought, and they tore the building down, and they built a beautiful building there, and hopefully they're still remain there and successful. They seem to be growing. So there are other things, but when you go by like Roche Brothers, there's 2 vacancies in that plaza. There's a bunch in Donlands Plaza, or Cool's Plaza, whatever they call that. And you do see those storefronts that here and there that are vacant. And I'd encourage you to work with the landlords of these businesses, of the malls, to fill those vacancies. Keep businesses and look for other types of businesses that want to come in, like an Insulet, or we get the Kmart building that's been vacant for a bunch of years now, and the McDonald's, which is a complete eyesore. You get a business that maybe Starbucks would want to move from where they are over to the McDonald's, and some kind of incentive to get them to go over there and renovate that building and have a much nicer building and presentation of the community, instead of that building that looks like it's going to fall over tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other FinCom questions? Thank you.
Okay, questions from the public?
Hi, Alyssa Nickel, School Street in South Acton, where there's a municipal sewer. Thank you, Julie, for the presentation. It's really a lot of great information. And I just wanted to express my particular gratitude that the wastewater solutions options language was put in there, rather than assuming that municipal sewer is the only way to treat wastewater. So I just wanted to say that first of all. I also don't know what percentage would be considered growing rapidly, but from the housing production plan update a couple of years ago, there was an 8% growth for every decade for the last, I think, 30 years. So I guess I would maybe question whether or not we can characterize Acton's growth as slow. And I also wanted to make a note that there doesn't seem to be a lack of wastewater management options, because we have options for septic systems. We have advanced septic options. There's a municipal sewer in South Acton. There are packaged treatment plants. We have quite a few, actually, in Acton. We have residences at Quail Ridge, Acorn Park Condominium, Briarbrook Village Apartments, Farmbrook Trust, Great Road Apartments, Suburban Manor, Yankee Village, and then, of course, the Fort Pond Brook wastewater treatment plant. And those are, pretty focused on residential areas, but they also serve commercial areas. So package treatment plants are an option. And I just want to also question, if sewer is the panacea, municipal sewer expansion, then we probably wouldn't have, I can't remember who just mentioned McDonald's and Kmart empty for decades, or 2 empty storefronts in Roach Brothers, because there is sewer available there. And I see Great Road as the place where these new businesses came in this year, and I see West Acton Village where there isn't sewer, but there's this advanced septic system. That's a very vibrant area. So I just want to, in the work of the Economic Department and the Economic Development Committee, I'd like us to continuing to focus on wastewater options that are not just municipal sewer, and also always remember that the package treatment plants and the septic systems and the advanced septic systems keep our groundwater recharging our aquifers, which is where we get our drinking water. So if we put more wastewater to South Acton at the Fort Brown Brook treatment plant, then it's going to be leaving the other parts of town and going to South Acton instead of replenishing the groundwater aquifers all over the town. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Matt, I believe we've got 2 online. Could you please let some folks in?
Yes, Mr. Chair. First is Tara. You should be able to unmute and speak.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you so much for letting me speak. I agree with what Alyssa said wholeheartedly, but with one correction, I believe that the water actually leaves town. It doesn't just go to South Acton. And then my comments. I believe it's not fair to characterize the wastewater need with an extreme example such as restaurant versus car dealer, because the places that are putting in car dealerships have sufficient septic capacity, I believe, that they could be putting in restaurants. And I hope that instead of talking so much about putting in potentially very expensive wastewater systems paid for all businesses, including existing small businesses who don't need additional wastewater capacity, that we focus perhaps on rezoning to stop so many car dealerships instead of allowing us to effectively become the back alley to Concord and creating an auto mile. I feel like we should make a restaurant mile. Yes, it's tempting to say any business, yay, but look at Insulet. Insulet is using more water than any other business in town, I believe. So I think we got to be really careful. I love that Julie was talking about characterizing what businesses we want, and Jim talk about some of the businesses are not necessarily something that we want. I personally would rather have higher taxes residential to, limit the businesses that aren't really doing anything for the character of the town or the services that we need. My last comment is relative to housing. Please look forward to supporting the Acton Affordable Housing Rehab Trust, which is focusing on housing for working people making between $30,000 to $50,000 a year, and this is, I believe, a need that can be satisfied with existing housing, as opposed to adding carbon footprint or heavily subsidizing to bring that into the affordability range for the businesses that you mentioned, and also just adding that Nagog Woods has its own sewer. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Next one.
Next up is a calling user. Number ended in 7330. You can unmute and let us know who you are.
Hi, this is Franny Osmond calling from a phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. I generally agree with comments about, definitely about the need for affordable housing for people who work here. I think the reason we have low unemployment is that nobody can afford to stay if they're unemployed. And I also agree generally with the talk about wastewater, but I do think municipal wastewater, meaning sewers, would help. Even in West Acton, where some businesses have been able to go in, the restaurants are so limited, like where Savory Lane was so limited, and in the number of tables they could have, that they they can't really thrive as large businesses anyway. But what I really wanted to mention was Kelly's Corner and sidewalks. I just want to talk about this when you're talking about the capital plan. The plan to borrow money and complete the sidewalks that people have been waiting for 15 years is so important for people to be able to thrive in Acton, and for the employment centers the same. And in Kelly's Corner, I don't want to be building a sidewalk to nowhere, and I would like the town to really look into and be proactive and even aggressive in talking to Stop and Shop and trying to purchase that property, because we are going to have a need to renew our senior center lease, and I just don't want to be, as I said, building a sidewalk to nowhere. I would like to be able to really own the plan, and we got so close. We were just under a supermajority at town meeting for the plan to improve the whole, to pass the whole, I don't know if it's called an overlay or whatever, the plan for Kelly's Corner, and it just missed a few years ago, and then we just sort of gave up. And I would like to see all the work of that planning department and the Kelly's Corner committee come to fruition by bringing that back to town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, do we have anyone else?
That's it, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you very much, Julie. Great presentation. Appreciate it. Mr. Manager.
Thank you. Am I okay over here? You want me to go up on the podium?
You're fine right there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, thank you. Thank you, members of the Finance Committee, for joining for this joint session. I think this is the second time we've done this, and I hope it's a long tradition, because the capital improvement plan is what I see as the beginning of the budget process. It really lays out what are the big picture items that we need to start thinking about this year, but also over the next 10 years. So, 10-year capital investment plan, it shows, it helps us invest in our community goals and our priorities. We have several things that come through that we need to try to fit into this plan, and this is how we try to lay it out over 10 years. Of course, we'll present the FY24 plan, and then as we go through the budget process, it'll be adjusted to meet the revenues that we actually have. And then future years will always continue to need to be worked in again and again and developed further, and also with the support of some further policy direction on, how the priorities fit into what we want to do each year. One of the, we have guiding documents in addition to just all the work that we do every day. We also have guiding documents that have been established through a community engagement process. One example of one of those is a comprehensive community plan. It's titled Acton 2020, although it was completed several years before that. But it is still something that we refer to and use as we're trying to prioritize things that we bring forward into our capital investment plan. Another big part of our capital planning process is the select board goals. The board sets goals every year, usually in the peak of the summer, and those goals are used for us to make sure that we address anything that is in the short-term goals in the current year's capital plan, and we make sure that anything that's in the long-term goals that's capital related fits into the 10-year plan somehow, so that we can be responsive to the board's immediate needs. And the board changes every few years or so, and the goals change every year, and the 10-year plan will continue to evolve to make sure that it's fully addressing both the comprehensive community plan goals and the Acton Select Board goals. And then there's now a new document that we use to help guide a lot of the investments that we're making, which is called our Climate Action Plan. This is a big project led by Andrea Becerra, our Sustainability Director, with a lot of support from committee members and volunteers and local advocates, and the Select Board had a big role in this as well. This is a plan that is a roadmap for how to get to a more resilient future, and how to identify investments that achieve the largest and most cost-effective reductions to emissions. And also doing that in a way that benefits all residents and not just certain residents, I guess. The cap will help us figure out how to get to the goal of net zero by 2030, which is a goal that town meeting from a few years ago identified through a town meeting resolution as something that community highly values. It also just generally outlines climate goals, priorities, and strategies. Those strategies are in areas from buildings and housing to energy, mobility, nature-based solutions, solid waste, and resilience. The thing that's interesting about the climate action plan is that it speaks a lot about the community generally, but it also speaks to the municipality and what our role is in trying to get to a more resilient future. And so this capital plan is focused mostly on things that we can do as a municipal organization, and we recognize that there are things that the community can do in addition to that. One of the big items you'll see in the capital plan this year is electrification. The climate action plan was also incorporating an electrification roadmap project that we completed, looking at our 3 biggest buildings, the public safety facility, the town hall, and the memorial library, as well as the large schools from the school district. And the plan was to identify a way to transfer all of those buildings' systems to fully electric, and how to do it and when to do it. And so it developed a roadmap, and in this capital plan, we're going to start the process of electrifying those buildings with the public safety facility. So I mentioned 10 years. There's $102 million worth of investments in this plan, 97 projects. Some of the projects in the 10-year plan will need additional revenue. I made an arrow here to point that out. So a lot of the projects that are in the 10-year plan we're calling to do through general fund borrowing. General fund borrowing to pay the debt service on. We need to be able to do that within the tax levy, and if we are not able to do that, we need to seek additional revenue through a debt exclusion. The most recent one we did was for the fire station. And so in last year's capital plan, we talked about needing to do that for a major sidewalk investment, and I think that's still something that would need to be considered by the town, as well as other major building projects like the potential DPW facility that I'll also be discussing. So I just wanted to lay that out there, that there's multiple sources of revenue, but there will be a need for additional revenue to do some of the bigger things that you see in this 10-year plan. So to the specific recommendations for the upcoming budget year, FY24 project recommendations. Again, another pie chart, and I also have a big arrow to point out that this year in FY24 is a unique year. And it's unique because almost $10 million of funding is being utilized from outside sources. ARPA being a big one, but also we've brought in millions of dollars worth of grants in the last few years, and other state earmarks, federal earmarks, all these different programs that we use to get money from the outside, we're bringing into Acton to offset and reduce the burden on local taxpayers. And so the plan for FY24 is to really focus on attacking those projects and working on those projects, getting those projects completed. And so you'll see that there may not be as many projects proposed with local funding as there have been in other years, and will need to be going forward because of this almost $10 million of outside funding that we're using. Some of the highlights in the plan, there are about $4.2 million worth of investments directly related to the climate action plan. One of those is a $1.2 million investment in the public safety facility to electrify it. We're also proposing $1.3 million to advance the next phase of design for the new DPW facility. We're also proposing $100,000 to implement a new body-worn camera program for the police department. And as I mentioned, almost $10 million from outside sources. Another big one is we're making over $1 million of improvements to our dispatch center, the public safety facility, is getting a complete overhaul and adding new equipment to it. All things that we have in our 10-year plan, but because we're working on a regionalization project with the town of Concord, we're able to use that funding to do that major facility and equipment upgrade using outside funding. And that $10 million number I mentioned does not include the $18+ million that the state and federal government is investing in Kelly's Corner next year, or starting right now. So here are just a breakdown of the projects that this is published in the full version of this is published in the capital improvement plan. But just to go through high level, as I mentioned, the public works facility and the electrification of the public safety facility. We're also in need of doing a tight tank for Fire Station 3. And there's a project that we've been working on Maple Street, the parking lot and buildings that we acquired there next to the train station. We have a design that was approved by the board to reconfigure that site to better serve pedestrians and commuters and cyclists. And it will also include adding a direct pedestrian connection to the train platform. And that is estimated to cost $600,000. So those are the projects that we're proposing to do from borrowing this year. The debt service for those would be $445,000 based on a 5% interest with varying years depending on the project type. Then every year within the operating budget, there are things that, it's funny, the finance committee we'll go to the finance committee and they'll say, that sounds like operating costs, not capital. And so all the things that you would say that to are within this portion of the budget, where they're actually in the operating budget, but they're assigned to different departments to do major equipment upgrades, like the DPW one. That's replacing all of our fleet, and it's using that funding source to turn over the highway department fleet, but also all of the other municipal vehicles to energy-efficient vehicles. The police one is specifically for cruisers to do the same, and then the other items are self-explanatory, and that's just work that we do every year that's reoccurring in the budget every year, but we're considering it capital because there are capital investments within there, and that's what those are. Then free cash projects, we're proposing $375,000 from free cash this year to accomplish several projects. One of them is to reconfigure and reconstruct the parking lot that's behind this building that serves both the Memorial Library and the Town Hall. Thousands of people every week come to use this facility, and it's much in need of safety improvements for people that park and want to walk, or people that bring their bikes here. And so we have a design that we've brought forward that realign how people access the two facilities here and make it safer for people to walk around, and also add some more spaces for things that we need to make it a safe parking lot. The construction would be more. The proposal here is just to do the next phase of design to get it ready for construction, and hopefully we can find a grant for that potentially. Other projects are things that you see often: traffic calming and intersections, stormwater management, dam management. That's the body camera I mentioned. Roadway condition. Here's an interesting one that's new to the capital program this year. It's the fireworks event. This is an event that's been held here for a long time, I would imagine. The last time we've had it actually was 2019. The last few years, for a few reasons, public health and otherwise, we did not hold the celebration, and we'd like to bring it back, but the cost of it is something that is not in the operating budget, and it would need to be identified. We often rely heavily on public-private partnerships, and we would continue to pursue that, but in the event that they're not available, we need to make sure we have funding to do the event and move it forward. And so that's what this is. Then there's projects that are within the enterprises. So Finance Director Steve Barrett likes to say that our enterprises represent businesses that we're running as part of the government, and they have their own whole entire funding source. They bring in revenue, they spend revenue, they have retained earnings that they then use to reinvest in their business. So some of the projects that we'll be reinvesting in these businesses are command vehicles, ambulance, a study on the fire stations to see what the future looks like and how to best align those facilities to meet the needs of the community. and some equipment for the transfer station, and upgrading the fire suppression systems for the sewer pumping and treatment plant. So, as I mentioned, $4.2 million worth of investments are directly tied to climate action plan goals and strategies. That is a list there, which is also in the document that's published online. And I look forward to any questions and comments. And again, this is the first step in the budget process. I look forward to feedback tonight from both the Finance Committee and the Select Board. And as we move forward, it'll help inform what goes into the town manager's recommended budget, which I'll be presenting here in this room in 2 weeks. And then it'll continue as we work through the budget process. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll certainly have lots of opportunities to ask some questions. I'd like to start off with one regarding the electrification proposal you have for the public safety facility, and specifically heating. Are we looking at ground source or air source systems for that building?
That is a specific detail that is in the roadmap as a recommendation, and I don't have a specific answer, but it's in there.
Thank you. Questions from other members of the board? David.
I didn't notice it. Do you have these smaller buildings in town, smaller municipal buildings in the electrification roadmap too, or are they not covered in this timeframe?
So they are included. So what we're focusing on the big 3 buildings because those are the biggest energy users and the most actively used. But we also have a set aside additional funding to look at the rest of the buildings. I think it was $60,000 or $70,000 over the ARPA fund to look at, specifically looking at electrification of all the other buildings that weren't in that study.
Other questions from the Select Board? Finance Committee.
Thank you, John. Since the preeminent object seems to be the public safety building and its electrification, can you just give us a quick background on what the current system there is? Is it a gas system that we're converting to 100% electric?
Yes, I'll do my best. It was built approximately 20 years ago, so all the systems are nearing what we like to see as end of life. It is a natural gas. It is connected to natural gas. So I imagine that's a primary source. Perhaps the Select Board Chair may have a better working history of the knowledge of the systems in that building, but we did change over all the lighting to LED, but that was already electric. So that's the best I can do for right now.
Other members of the FinCom? Let me go just down the line here. Mr. Noon?
Yeah, thanks, John. My compliments on another outstanding document and presentation. I am a little concerned. So went back and looked at ones from a couple of years ago, and I think the total was $75 million 2 years ago and $89 million last year, and now we're up to $102 million. Which just tells me we're finding a lot of good things to spend money on. But as you pointed out, we're not necessarily finding the revenue to pay for any of these yet. Do you have the, or maybe Dean knows the answer, the actual dollars in the public safety building that we spend on gas and electric? Because the way it was written up, and I had not a lot of time to review the document, was this percent goes up by this much and this goes down by that much, but it didn't really add up because I couldn't see the absolute numbers.
Right. So the primary goal of the electrification roadmap project was to reduce emissions. And cost savings was not the primary goal. And I think the cost savings are not as clear to me as the emissions savings, which is the goal of the climate action plan. So the numbers that, it's 70 pages of work that went into that with the analysis of, yes, they basically studied what they called as doing nothing or replacing everything the same way and what that would look like from an energy use standpoint, and then replacing everything with the systems that they're recommending and what that would look like from an energy standpoint. We'd use more electricity, we'd use less of other sources, it would cost a little bit more, but it would be achieving the climate goals that we have for the community.
Well, maybe for the budget session in 2 weeks, you could just get what's the history on gas usage and electric usage in the public safety building in dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Ms. Anderson?
Hi, John. Regarding the parking lot, the Maple Street expansion, how much has parking usage regrown at the train station?
It's barely at 50% at this point. I think it may be over 50%, but not by much.
So is the thought to do this now when it's not very busy, to make these changes? Or I'm curious why we're not waiting until there's been more of an uptick.
The changes proposed here would make sense for any use of that facility, and really would create a better pedestrian connection for people coming from that way anyways, than what they have now. And it's a better connection between it's a safer way for people from accessing the rail trail that's right over there to the train station. So it's not just a parking lot, it's how the parking lot interacts with Maple and the other street there.
John, thank you for your presentation. In regards to that, I have a lot of things to bring up, but Maple Street, I've gone down and used the Assabet Rail Trail, and there is a resident on Maple Street right at the beginning as you come down the hill from the bridge, and parks a big giant pickup truck right in the bike lane. Now, it's permitted, but to me, that defeats the purpose of having the bike lane if vehicles are going to be parked in it. That forces the bike rider to go out of that lane into the street. So that's something that should be addressed. It should not be allowed. You have a big truck, yeah, you can park in front of your house, but when you're blocking a bike lane we built the bike lane for a specific purpose to be used as a bike lane, not as parking your car there or your vehicle. In regards to the fire station study, that was done several years ago before you arrived. And I don't know if that's been dusted off and looked at that and look what the condition of the facility is now versus what that plan was at the time and what the findings were of the fire stations based on what they think might need to be done now. In other words, they're going to identify the same issues that they currently have. Well, we already have that in a document, so it's kind of defeating the purpose of spending all this money on a new study to look at the building that we know the conditions of and we know what needs to be done. So I don't know how that's going to help us, spending another $100,000 on another study to tell us the conditions that we already know that exist in the fire department, in their facilities.
Thank you for the question. The issue of parking in a bike lane was something that we're continuing to try to address. The project proposed would not help that, but hopefully it'll create a better environment for cyclists just in general over there. To the question about the fire station study, it's $25,000 that's proposed, and this is meant to complement the work that is underway or will be underway soon. Yes, we did a facility study before I arrived here, and we actually did most of the major projects that were recommended in that study, and so it's time to sort of update that. That work is underway right now. There was a town meeting approved the study in 2021, I believe, to update that in its entirety and also look at potential clean energy retrofits as part of it. This funding is to be used to look at both facility use and programmatic needs. And now that we have a fourth station in the mix, where we didn't have before, we were really able to move a lot of equipment around and change the way that we provide fire and ambulance services when we put this beautiful new station into service. And so this study would now have that factored in, and also the fact that we are hopefully going to be disposing of the old civil defense building, which was also used for storage. So some things have changed since then, and we want to just recalibrate and set up a plan for the future. We know that those buildings will need to have reinvestment in them in the next 10 years. They're not shown in this capital plan. Sorry, Steve, it may be more than $102 million. But until we know what those investments look like and what makes sense on which ones to do first and how to prioritize that, and that's really the work of this other project that we're proposing right now.
Thank you. One other comment on police. You talked about 2 new vehicles. Hopefully, they'll be replacing their F-150 with a new hybrid F-150.
We're trying to get electric. They're hard to get. But yes,
The
hybrid.
study was electric in the winter gets 50% of the range than what it does in the summertime. So that might be an issue with that, but I wouldn't mind seeing a hybrid one over on the police force as well, like we do in the fire.
They would love that.
sure they
We're working on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Wellinghoff, any comments, questions?
For 2 weeks from now, maybe firm up the remaining useful life of those 3 individual projects, including the library and the town hall. I'm just thinking off the cuff, but if it's like the PSF is 20 years, you think? That's original installation, I'm guessing. It'd just be useful to know that how much life is left of this equipment as it is. And then this is a long shot, but are you aware of the schools doing anything similar to that?
So yes, the schools, we received a grant to do the project together. So they looked at all their schools. We looked at our 3 big buildings. They looked at useful life of facilities, and that's all in there. So I can bring that forward. There's a link to that report in here, but I can bring some of that data out and talk more about it. The thing that we found is that a lot of times facilities that are used like this have a faster, they get to the end faster, I don't know how to say that, than the manufacturers think. And so that's why we want to try to replace them a few years before they're supposed to be replaced so that we don't have a problem. But I'll certainly bring forward more of that information for everyone to see next time.
Finance Committee satisfied or done, shall I say?
Any further questions? So, Mr. Chair, when we conclude the CIP presentation, I'd like to adjourn the Finance Committee, but before we do, I wanted to specifically ask Mr. Mangiaratti and the Select Board if there's anything you would like the Finance Committee to deliberate on and come back with recommendations for the next joint meeting that's scheduled for the 19th with regard to the CIP.
Well, speaking only for myself, I think, some of the issues that there's an overwhelming theme of electrification. So I think any consideration the FinCom might have as far as converting some of our existing buildings from natural gas to electric and what the financial impacts are. I'll concede as far as the environmental impacts, but I think the financial impacts are something that's specifically within your purview. I've had the discussion with the town manager and has asked him to be able to update it insofar as he's capable of doing so, because we don't have a lot of data. For instance, to see how we're working out with the new fire station as far as the energy consumption and the costs compared to what the projections were. Now, we obviously won't have a full 12 months of actual experience with that building, so I think that's going to be tough to do, but I think that's something that there's a lot of number crunching that could be done there. As far as the public safety facility, we've got 20 years of utility bills. So I think we should be, and that, my understanding is it's the original installation with the building, and it's a natural gas fired sectional boiler. So we do have a lot of data in that instance, depending upon how much time and enthusiasm there is on the Finance Committee to look at the same sort of calculation for the proposal for the Memorial Library and the Town Hall, because they'll be coming down the road as well. But that's strictly me speaking off the cuff, and I would welcome comments from other members of the board to and the town manager to give you other guidance.
I guess I would start by saying before we invest the funding in the electrification, we'll complete a full design of the PSF. Right now, the roadmap that was completed by engineers and people that do this for a living. It was more of a feasibility study, so the next phase would be to actually design the project and show what it would look like. And so we would do that first. That would be funded through ARPA funds that's already been appropriated and approved by the board for this purpose. And the reason that this project is in the FY24 budget is just to get authorization to borrow. When we do that work, it's not likely something that we would even be able to do in '24. Because we're also going to be looking to do design for the other facilities, so we have a better sense of what the full cost of those electrifications, so that we can plan for those. So I just wanted to clarify that design funding is available and will be used, and this is just to authorize for the borrowing to do the construction that's needed. And we wouldn't borrow it in '24. We'd probably borrow afterwards, but this is just seeking the authorization.
So based on those comments, it sounds like there may not be anything we need to vote on specifically between now and the 19th. This is my personal opinion, sort of off the back of the envelope and what I know of facilities, HVACs, these types of things. I would encourage you to, as you look at the design and the options, consider, if possible, leaving the system that's there in place until it actually does fail, as a means of having multiple sources of heating or cooling or whatever the case may be, so that you can take advantage of any savings in resources as they come up before the equipment finally dies and needs to be thrown out, as opposed to just throwing it out as part of the course of switching it over to electrification. But I think that's all. Any other questions, Finance Committee? Thank you.
Jim?
So looking at the electrification roadmap document, of course, one of the big mysteries in figuring out the savings is the costs of electricity. So I just wanted to bring your attention to the fact that on our consent agenda tonight is authorizing the town manager to execute the right documents that allow us to proceed to have an agreement about putting a solar canopy project on at the public safety facility. And one of the big features of that is allowing us, of course, to lock in fixed electricity prices over the next 20 or 25 years, which it really helps turn the scales on the comparing the costs. And no one is proposing putting a fracking facility there to allow us to generate on-site natural gas. So electricity seems to be our the best way we can to generate our own power. Thanks.
Mr. Board.
I know in the solar array that's at the transfer station that there was specific intervals where the town could buy that facility, and I would strongly urge the board to look at that to determine when we can buy it, what would the cost be, and what's the expected life expectancy of those panels, and how much, we're not going to know how much they had to replace, because that could be 20 years down the line or 30 years down the line, but it behooves the town to look at that and see what the cost would be, because maybe that'd be the best avenue, is to acquire that so that we get the full benefit of that as a town.
Comments from the public?
Ann Chang again. I would like to request for the two projects that are going to involve the library, particularly the one that's going to involve the parking lot, reimagining the parking lot, that you also involve some trustees in your planning, please.
Well, of course, Corey was at the trustees meeting just a few weeks ago to talk about one of them, and we'll definitely bring the electrification project forward. That's a little further down the line, but absolutely.
Okay, because I didn't like the one that you had before.
Alyssa Nickel again. I would just encourage the Finance Committee, if you're going to be looking at the costs of the electrification projects, that you not only look at the cost that it takes to put those in, and the efficiency and operation of it, but also all of the other costs that are cost savings, in terms of health, in terms of, flooding. I've heard that, why should we bother doing this in Acton? We're such a tiny little part of the globe, and we've got India and China that are also burning coal and burning other fossil fuels, but we all have to do it if we want to continue to maintain the services that are provided by the services that are provided when we put the efforts into electrification to mitigate all of the flooding and storms and hurricanes and things like that, as well as impacts to human health. Thanks.
Okay. Seeing no other questions. Okay, Matt, I believe we've got a couple of people online.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The first one is Franny Osman. Franny, you should be able to speak.
Hi, this is Franny, and I was in transition and wasn't able to look at your presentation, and then I was looking online. I couldn't find the capital improvement plan there. Is it there, John?
It's there. It's not easy to find until I dress it up tomorrow, but it's also going to be in the extra information folder for this packet. I believe it may already be there, Lisa? It's already there. Yeah, it's in the extra information folder for this meeting.
I didn't see it, but
Like two minutes ago.
okay, great. So excuse me if you said this or pointed it out. So my question is that borrowing to do all the sidewalks, the priority sidewalks, in there?
It is in the 10.
Will that be done?
To the question of the sidewalk, major sidewalk investment that we talked about last year, it's in the 10-year plan. It is not in FY24. We're still in the process of doing the sidewalk master plan update to try to identify those big investments, and we really want to get that in good shape before we go and ask the voters and the select board to consider a debt exclusion override, and we're just not there. So I believe it's in FY25.
Okay, I would just put in the comment that I think that's too soon. People have waited 15 years, and it's a matter of safety, and I don't think we should delay. I think that's a mistake. So I just wanted to say that about that. I think that's all I'll comment on right now about the capital improvement plan. Thank you. I think we should do it this year.
Thank you, Matt.
And the next one.
The next one, please.
Yes, the next one is Tara.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yes, thank you. I'm super glad to hear FinCom members supporting green initiatives. That's really exciting to me because of the return on investment in so many ways for reasons that Alyssa stated, and it's not just the overall community health of the globe, it's for our own health, biosystems, et cetera, et cetera. I will make the note that I hope we can figure out a way not to keep calling gas that's really poisonous natural gas. And then I was going to mention that a lot of people who live in Acton Center want the Acton Center fire station, and they were assured that the effort by supporting the North Acton fire station wasn't a step toward removing the Acton Center fire station. And then my last comment is really a question. Is Acton, the town of, the municipal government, on Acton green power choice?
I will refer that to the town manager.
I didn't understand the last question.
ATC Green.
Oh, are we on it? Yes, we are. Yes. We,
So just to make sure I understand here, the municipal government uses all of its electricity from the Acton Green Power Choice. And so I'm so excited by that.
yeah, so in the FY23 budget, the year that we're in right now, there was a proposal to increase the budgets to accommodate the transition to the 100% green. That was before rates increased significantly, but we're currently still there unless we're directed to do otherwise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Smyers, Central Street. I've expressed my concern about switching over to 100% electric. I'm skeptical. The math doesn't work, and I think you should use all your options. Natural gas is a very clean burning product. I just had my furnace inspected and checked. It's an oil furnace. The output of CO2 was, I was trying to find the receipt on my phone, but I'm pretty sure it was less than 1 part per million of output of an oil burning furnace. So this is very low. Make sure that if you are going to switch to green energy, because I don't really think that I'm going to have an impact on any of you, but you have some backup furnaces that are backup generators that run on fuel, because when the electricity goes out, you don't really have backup electricity. And we all know how popular the 100 Discovery Drive project is right now in town, which is supposed to provide some backup electricity from electricity. So just be cautious, use some common sense. You know, Acton is not the problem when it comes to global warming. You know, that's clear on all the data. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I suppose now would be a good time to release the Finance Committee.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say thank you to the Select Board for having us. We do appreciate these joint meetings, and I know that our town employees who present and only have to present once instead of twice certainly appreciate it, and I think that goes a long way. So I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, item 7. Review and comment on the draft goals for the open space and recreation plan. Jim.
So as a reminder, we're in the middle of developing the new open space and recreation plan. Sure. We're in the middle of developing a new open space and recreation plan. There was recently a public meeting to get a lot of public input. The staff group that's been working on that has come up with proposed goals for the open space and recreation plan, which are a little bit different than the goals from the previous open space and recreation plan. And they're calling together a meeting of the liaisons from the various boards and committees in January to review these goals and to, see what other feedback people might want to bring. I'm currently the liaison to the Open Space and Recreation Plan, so I would like to describe the new goals, compare them to the old goals, and then listen to your input about, what are they okay? Are there other changes you'd like to see? What's missing, et cetera? So that would be my plan. Is that okay, Mr. Chair? Just sort of describe the situation, then get feedback?
Please do.
Okay. The previous OSRP had 3 goals: preserve Acton's rural character, protect the environment, and improve recreational opportunities for everyone. The new proposed goals are 4, and we'll talk about why 4 rather than 3. But you'll hear echoes of the previous goals. The new proposed goals are protect critical environmental resources, improve and expand recreation opportunities, preserve historic, cultural, and landscape features, and finally, incorporate sustainability in future open space and recreation decisions. And I talked to Melissa, who from the head of the Recreation Department, who's been organizing this effort so far, and she gave me some information about why these changes that I'll pass on to you guys. The first is that preserve Acton's rural character has been a phrase in the Open Space and Recreation Plan and our comprehensive community plan documents for quite a while. And it's created a fair amount of confusion and wasted effort because it's unclear what it means. Is rural character, stone walls? Is rural character, single-family houses with big land around them? Does rural character mean we work back towards a population of 4,000 or 5,000 like it was 50 years ago? So what does it mean? So they've replaced that with the preserve historic, cultural, and landscape features, which, although it is also somewhat vague, is at least fairly specific about what things it means and what things it doesn't mean. The other change is that protect the environment has been split up into two goals. One that's relatively similar, protect critical environmental resources, and the other one to incorporate sustainability in future open space and recreation decisions. That second one, the incorporating sustainability, it echoes the Select Board's environmental sustainability policy. The other change it used to be improve recreational opportunities for everyone, and now it says improve and expand recreation opportunities, and it no longer says for everyone, which is something that jumped out at me that we might want to comment on. That's the information I got from Melissa. So I will happily write down whatever people say to me.
Well, I'll start off. I think, and the old plan did not specifically call out purchasing of open space or preserving open space. And I think that was a shortcoming of the previous plan, and I would hope that either within the goals that you've set forth, or if they can add another goal, I think open space and recreation begins and ends with preserving open space. Open space are a critical resource for innumerable reasons, and it's endangered here in town. So I think it's very important that every possible option be looked at to purchase, preserve, protect open space, even to the detriment of the other goals, because once the land is gone, it's gone. I think it's important to protect it now. We can always figure out how to build a recreational facility on a piece of open space later on, but I think it's important that we get these few pieces of land that are left available, we get those nailed down and in the public domain. That's the one comment that I would have on the draft goals. Open it for other members of the public, of the board. Imager.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. Yes, thank you, Jim, for that. One thing you did note was the change in language from improving recreational opportunities for everyone to improving and expanding recreational opportunities without explicitly saying for everyone. And for me, personally, I do think that having the for everyone there is helpful. It underlines the importance of inclusion, and emphasizing accessibility and things like that when we talk about open space and recreation. So for me, I feel like that would be a valuable addition to that goal.
David?
Thank you. I agree that open space should be mentioned, as Dean said, but I would, for me, not to the detriment of the other goals. But I think it's important to call out here, and I'm actually surprised it wasn't called out previously, unless people were thinking of it as under recreation. And I agree with Himmage's comment about for everyone, but I would try to figure out a way to make it apply to everything here, not just the recreational things, you know. So the open space purchases that we make are, you know, we almost always have used them for recreation as well. They, as far as I know, they all have trails on them. You know, to make sure that people know about those trails and that, you know, that they can use them. And they're safe for everybody to use. And the same thing for historical and cultural features that we preserve. You know, people should know about those and you know, be able to, you know, take them in and view them and everything. So I would just like that for everyone to apply to everything.
Fran?
Have a quick comment, and I do like the wiggle from preserve Acton's rural character to preserve historic, cultural, and landscape features. I don't view Acton as rural at all. I think we're moving away from that. We do, however, have a lot of farms and would like to see that respected and preserved. Jim, I was curious, for number 3, were you looking for input from other committees? Okay, so HC, HDC?
A lot of committees were asked to provide liaisons to the Open Space and Recreation Plan. If there were committees that the OSRP neglected, I'm sure they'd want to know about it.
Okay, thanks.
David?
Just as far as I know, some committees were asked to provide representatives. Others, Melissa is meeting with, and, you know, so some of the ones that maybe are more directly related, like the Open Space Committee, is supplying a representative. Other committees have been asked, or Melissa's presenting to and asking for input on that.
Thank you.
Comments from the public?
Hi, Alyssa Nickel. Just real quick, I hope that the board decides to include a focus on protecting drinking water, both quantity and quality. I can't remember for sure a previous iteration of the Open Space and Recreation Plan. I think it was 2002 to 2007, maybe, so 2 plans ago. There was a really strong emphasis on drinking water as a resource that was extremely valuable and in need of serious protection. And somehow that disappeared in the previous iteration. And I hope it comes back in. And I think that if that comes from the board, it would be really heeded. Not heated, heeded. Thanks.
Thank you. John, do we have anyone in the virtual audience that? Okay, Matt, would you let the caller in, please?
Tara, you should be able to speak.
Hi, it's Tara, and thank you for letting me speak. I agree with Dean about preserving open space. I think that we can preserve as much open space as possible and meet the social goals. I feel like it's important to actually take a stand and say, what percentage, at the end of the planning period, what percentage of the land do we want preserved? That'll help us figure out how to be more equitable about such land. And so I hope that that there's a percentage that's committed to, or at least hoped for. And I agree with what he said about preserve open space, but I would add the word more, or even go as far as to say what he said, to preserve as much as possible, including fixing zoning to prevent more single-family homes and stuff like that. I agree that it's a glaring omission from the old OSRP, and it's even an omission in this set of goals, given that the trails were so big in the survey, the most popular choice by far of what people enjoy, etc. I agree with Alyssa about protection of drinking water for the same reason. And I do like the word rural, but understand the inclusivity concerns, because I don't think we want to encourage gun-toting cowboys necessarily, but I wouldn't get into how that relates to policing. But if we could add something about charm and inviting and beautiful, the word scenic vista, perhaps, something that relates to, Andy McGee said this wonderful thing once. He said that when he comes over the Route 2, out to the Route 2 rotary, and he spots the open fields and how that changes his whole, if I remember what he said, like demeanor, it relaxes. It's just very meditative to see that open space. And so scenic vistas, I hope you put something in there. Oh, and my last comment is a request. I would like very much to see the raw data from the surveys. We, during the master plan effort, we got the raw data, as I think raw data should always be available. And we identified a bunch of things that wouldn't have been included if we hadn't had the raw data and weren't allowed to code the responses to the word, the block other and things like that. So I would like to see the raw data, and I hope that will be posted on DocuShare. Thank you so much for this work. It's really, I'm very, very excited about planning. A lot of things seems to be falling into place, and I'm seeing a lot of things going on that really make me feel good about the town's ability to plan and the desire to plan, and in a sustainable fashion. I really feel like we are at least turning in that direction towards something I think will really be able to achieve some serious planning goals. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Jim, do you have any additional requests of us, or do you think you've got the gist of it?
Well, the thing that came up after the select board spoke that was new, that I hadn't heard from the select board, was about protecting the quality and quantity of drinking water. And it would be great to get feedback from the board about whether that's also important to board members to find a way to express in the goals.
Members of the board? David?
So, I think that falls into, protecting the environment. Myself, I'm not sure that it should have a lengthy section. This is the open space and recreation plan, right? I don't mind it mentioning water, but it shouldn't, to me, have a huge focus any more than any other environmental consideration, I think.
I think I agree with David on this, that certainly water resources are important, but I think that there does need to be a line between the town and the water district. We are collaborating with them on some very interesting open space projects, but I think there's probably sufficient wording in there without calling it out as a separate goal.
Yeah, so I definitely see drinking water protections as being important, and I do think it does fit under protecting critical environmental resources. I wonder if it's helpful to mention drinking water as part of that, and other environmental resources that tend to be focused on or prioritized as kind of a way to provide more definition to that goal. But maybe that comes in subsequent planning and things like that. So kind of depending on where in that process timeline it fits, I think that highlighting what those environmental resources look like will be critical.
Just to sort of summarize what I heard, water is important, protecting water is important. It may or may not belong in the goals part. And we will have time to review as the OSRP gets more developed, we'll have a chance to look at the sections and, examine if they're, if they're treating water right. So we'll be back.
Thank you, Jim. So item 8, approve floor amendment to the H 5013 bill, quote, an act authorizing the town of Acton to adopt alternative methods of notice of public hearing, unquote. Mr. Manager?
Good evening, thank you. As you might recall, the parent company of the Beacon newspaper announced it was ceasing publication of many weekly newspapers, and they steered us toward the Lowell Sun to continue those legal ads. That method's far more expensive than the Beacon was, so we brought a home rule petition to town meeting to ask the state to allow us to use more local and less expensive methods of advertising, and that article was approved there. During the state legislative process, a floor amendment was made, including various typographic changes, consistent with the legislative drafting manual and removing a severability clause, which is covered under state law in other places. The changes do not appear to alter the intent of the petition, but the legislature does require a select board vote to confirm what they have done. On your desk is a handout with a draft motion, the amended petition, and on the back in red line format.
Thank you. So I will read the draft motion and the revised petition for the members of the public. Draft motion, agenda item 8. Move to approve the amendment to House Bill 5013, an act authorizing the town of Acton to adopt alternative methods for notice of public hearings made by the House Committee on Bills in the third reading, all as set forth in the attached document. The revised petition. Section 1. Notwithstanding Section 11 of Chapter 40A of the general laws or any other general or special law to the contrary, the town of Acton may provide alternative means of publishing legal notices for public hearings that are required by law. Section 2. The town may permit that all notices of such public hearings shall be published, 1, in a local newspaper, either in electronic and paper format, 2, on the bulletin board outside the town clerk's office, and 3, on the town's website. The term website shall mean the official website of the town of Acton that is operated and maintained by the town's government. Section 3, this act shall take effect on its passage. Would someone like to move that wording?
I would like to move that wording.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion as read, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion is passed. Thank you. Item 9, discuss the proposed Town of Littleton Firearms Business Zoning Bylaw. Mr. Mangiaratti.
Thank you. In the packet is a memo from our town planning director, just regarding some zoning bylaw proposals that are being discussed, I think, right now or within the last week or so in Littleton as it relates to regulating firearm businesses, zoning businesses within the zoning bylaw, and just wanted to bring it to your attention to make sure that if there's anything in there that concerns you or interests you, that the board had an opportunity to discuss it, and if they need staff to do anything, we could do so.
Mr. Martin, was it your request this item was added to the agenda?
Yes, I think that we should ask the planning department and the planning board to propose a zoning change for town meeting to zone where retail firearms businesses are allowed to locate and under what circumstances. We regulate where all sorts of businesses can go, and right now the firearms businesses are not regulated. I mean, we regulate where car washes can go in our zoning bylaw. So I think this is very important to townspeople. The safety issues are often paramount to town residents, and I think this is one of them. The businesses that are leaving Littleton are considering locating in Acton, and so I think that we need to move this along.
Comments from other members of the board? Imogen.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I do think having the planning department's feedback on this will be helpful. It was really helpful to look at the links from Littleton and Wellesley that were provided as initial research from the planning department, and I think getting their feedback on what a special permit could look like for Acton regarding firearm dealers, I think would be a good step. So yeah, I'm in support.
Other comments? Jim?
What I appreciated about the Wellesley version of the bylaw was that it was clear that it wasn't trying to, prevent the sale of guns. It was not a challenge to the Second Amendment. It was accepted by the Attorney General, and it's just simply, saying where these businesses are appropriate and where they're not appropriate, which, as David was explaining, is the business of zoning. So I think it's it's a helpful thing to add. I'm not sure about the urgency of it in terms of prioritizing what the work of the planning department does, but I think it's a good thing to address. If we have a sense of the the agreement on the urgency of it and the relative urgency compared to other things planning staff could be working on.
Thank you. Fran? No?
I just wanted to say that I agree. I think dealing with it sooner rather than later would be a good thing. I know that Littleton is having a public hearing, I think Wednesday, the 7th, on, I don't know what time, but I was going to duck in and check it out. And so as far as it having a special permit, that would have to be voted on by, say, the select board. Is that right? If we did do some sort of zoning, yeah. Thanks.
All right. I'll offer my own thoughts on this, which are somewhat at variance from the entirety of the board. I take note of the fact that there are over 1,000 persons licensed to carry firearms in the population of Acton. So it's a considerable amount of the population are, I think, comfortable with the idea of firearms. I would note that firearms and the ability to possess a firearm is a natural right that's been recognized by the Constitution. I think we have serious Second Amendment issues once we start to go down this route of regulating sale of firearms beyond the regulations we do for other products. I think that it's conceivably could set a bad precedent that what's the next group that decides that they don't like a specific product? People might decide that we don't like gas stations. People might decide that we don't approve the sale of animal products in supermarkets. It can just go further and further. I'll also suggest a practical issue is that, that although the Wellesley bylaw was approved by the Attorney General, any of these bylaws quite likely could be subject to further litigation going all the way to the Supreme Court. And I think we all know where the Supreme Court has come in affirming the rights of Americans to keep and bear arms. So just from financial impact, do we want to be the town that could conceivably pursue something like this all the way to the Supreme Court? Previous select boards decided it was a good idea to pursue something regarding CPC allocations all the way to the Supreme Judicial Court at a huge expense to the taxpayers, and the town lost. So I do not favor this sort of regulation as a personal choice for myself, and I do not favor the idea of spending a great deal of staff time and certainly legal budget money pursuing this. Perhaps the wisest choice is wait and see how this proceeds in Littleton, and if there's going to be legal challenges to any action they take, I'll let them spend the money to defend it, and then we can always revisit it a year or two down the road when the dust is settled from that litigation. But certainly I respect the views of my colleagues on the board. I just don't agree with them. I would see if there's any comments from the audience.
Scott Myers, Central Street, thank you. I don't know a whole lot about what's going on in Littleton, but I've heard a little bit, so maybe I can ask a question or two. Has there been anything illegal happened from the results of the gun sales in Littleton? As far as I've heard, it's been legal, but people found out about it and they didn't know about it. There wasn't anything illegal about it, and now they want to do something about it. Is that correct?
Mr. Mangiaratti, can you enlighten us on that?
Well, not knowing the specifics, my understanding is that they're looking at creating zoning that doesn't currently exist to address a big part of the business community that's not part of the zoning. So I don't know the question of legality. I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, nobody got shot in the mill, right? And they bought a gun and shot somebody. Is that, we didn't hear, nothing like that happened. So I just want to make sure I understand the severity or lack thereof of what happened.
David.
As far as I know, there were a couple of gun shops in a building that were kind of under the radar. In other words, they didn't really advertise themselves, right? As far as I know, they didn't do anything illegal, not that I am aware of. They were just kind of doors in buildings, and people were surprised, basically.
Okay, that was my interpretation too, so that makes sense. All right, so with that, just confirming my understanding of it, I agree with the chair that less regulation is better in the United States. I would also point out that we're in Acton, right? The first people that got shot in the Revolution, and Isaac Davis was a gunsmith. He knew exactly what he was doing with guns. He was an innovator in that regard, so it's nice to have that as a backdrop if we decide what we want to do to, for our fellow citizens of Acton. Do they have the freedom to defend themselves or not? I think that's an important characteristic that I would like to preserve here in town. So I hope you will think about this carefully, and if it does go to town meeting. I'm sure it'll get a lot of attention, and I don't know if there'll be a lot of words for probably nothing if what we understand what happened at Littleton. There was no harm done by it, and everything was above board and legal, just not out in the open. You know, not all the, we hear the, Mr. Snyder Grant earlier recommending to the economic development presenter that we should be picking and choosing good businesses and bad businesses. And in economics 101, it's fairly basic. If you want freedom, you can't have the government picking and choosing businesses, period. It has to be fair to everyone. Firearms are part of those businesses that have a lot of complicated and possibly greenhouse producing machines that are needed, that are part of our economy. You know, if you go down Mass Ave in Boxborough, near where I work, there's millions of dollars of equipment right along Mass Ave there. A lot of people rely on that for their business, for their livelihood. You know, those are businesses that are okay too. It's not just restaurants and coffee shops, right? So just be fair to all the businesses, whether you like them or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Fran?
I have one comment, and this topic reminds me of just the cannabis situation. And when we were faced with maybe having shops in town, and it's the same kind of thing. I love to have the idea of, you know, the voters deciding. So if a warrant comes to town meeting, the voters can decide. So, but I liken these two as pretty similar topics.
David?
Yeah, so from my point of view, I'm not necessarily in favor of outlawing gun shops. That's not my motivation here, but I think that we should have the ability to assess where we want them, right? They may not be appropriate in all shopping centers in town. And so I think that's appropriate. And I don't believe we run into any Second Amendment issues unless the zoning laws were written in such a way as to try to outlaw them, right? If we said that they all had to be 500 feet setback from the street and there was no lot in town that you could set back a building 500 feet, that's kind of malicious zoning, right? And so I don't think we could do that, but I do think that we should, you know, have a proposal from the planning department and a discussion at town meeting where we would like these vendors to be. So that's my opinion.
Jim?
There's in the Wellesley bylaw, there's, other than, you know, setting up which zoning areas are okay for gun shops, just basically, you know, they're okay in commercial areas, not in strictly residential areas. There's 6, I think, very common sense limitations, and that I'd be very happy to argue for. And I think town meeting would go for it too. One is you have to have your business actually inside of a building. You can't be selling your guns outside. When it's in a building, the entrances have to be visible, which seems sensible. You can't have drive-through windows. You can't put your gun shop inside of a hotel, a motel, you know, transient housing. You can't, you have to operate between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And people under 18 aren't allowed to be in the gun shops. I think these are not, you know, highly restrictive. I think they're the kind of common sense safety regulations that people would be in favor of that we don't currently have a way of enforcing. Thanks.
So, my sense is that a majority of the board, a clear majority of the board, feels that this is something that should deserve some attention on the part of the planning staff. I note the fact that we're in December now and town meeting is in May, and this is brand new, so I'm pretty skeptical that you're going to see anything at town meeting this year. I just don't know as it's physically possible to do it. Even if the planning board was in favor of it, even if a zoning amendment was the proper way to go about it, I would be happy to have the town manager discuss this with the planning staff and come back, and probably not our next meeting, but probably sometime in January, and update us on what their thinking is. And by that time, we might have a better sense of how things transpired in Littleton. Does that meet the agreement of the board? Okay. Thank you, John. Item 10, discuss remote participation in public meetings. Now, I will make note of the fact that I took the initiative at our last meeting and felt that, and made the requirement that we eliminate the remote audience participation for select board meetings. I think there was some misunderstandings initially, but I took that action, got some pushback from members of the board and some thoughtful letters from members of the public. So I decided to pause that for this meeting, so we've been able to continue with the remote participation. A lot of the comments that I made then, I think, still apply. I think that civic engagement is important, and I think it works better for the most part when it's in person and face-to-face rather than on the phone or on Zoom. I think it's important to note that many of our major board that consumes 2/3 of all of the tax dollars in town, our school committee, decided on their own to eliminate remote audience participation. And there was, so far as I'm aware of, no feedback. And I'll note the fact that there are certain committees in town which meet virtually and will not accept any feedback at all in a virtual manner. So there is no way that in real time members of the audience can participate in those discussions. And I think that's inconsistent with the goals of open and fair access to public meetings. I'd certainly be delighted to hear further comments from members of the board about this entire discussion about remote participation, and certainly I'd be happy to hear discussion from members of the public. I'll work my way down the line. Imogen.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I appreciate the pause and putting this on the agenda so that we could have a discussion. I know that for at least the school committee, part of the reason why they did switch to removing that online participation was due to, number one, the technology, and two, I think also just a matter of perception of safety. But I will say that the meetings that are projected from the school committee aren't on Zoom. You have to access it via YouTube or ActonTV. But here we do have the option. We have the Zoom infrastructure. People log on via Zoom and have the opportunity to participate online. And I know that for people with accessibility issues, that's been a big difference in them being able to participate. So I think that given the fact that we've also invested in the technology, in this new sound system, so that we could make this more seamless hybrid format, it would be a shame to remove that online participation component. And I think that, at least for the committees that I oversee, I think that it is a mix between meeting in person and meeting online, but I will say the majority of my committees still meet online because it does provide a little bit more flexibility and opportunity to attend meetings, even like thinking about meetings such as the Board of Health, we've had a lot of people be able to call in and express their concerns. And that's been an effective format in getting public participation and feedback on issues that really matter to the public. And so I think that continuing a format for the select board that does involve this hybrid ability, I think is paramount. I think it's really, really important that we do continue this.
Thank you. Jim?
Thanks. I think each committee situation is different. I like the notion that it's a committee chair that determines the kind of participation that's appropriate for that committee. I appreciate your willingness to listen to those of us, as you consider what decision to make. And if for some reason, I can read the body language. I sort of know if we had a vote, I sort of know how it would go. But if you decide, no, you still want to do that, at least it would, just be for a few more months. And, we keep rotating chairs, so this situation would change. I'd still prefer to have public participation virtually in the select board, starting now, for the reasons that people have articulated. So I'll say that, and, hope it'll have an impact on your decision about it.
Thank you. Fran?
I'm not going to reiterate what was said, but I think it would be important to continue with virtually, input from residents. I think that's the main reason why we're here, is to listen. And I would hope that this could be a decision that the entire board can come to.
David?
Thank you. I appreciate your, Dean, your comments about civic engagement. I think, the best kind of meetings we have are, ironically enough, is when we have a controversial issue and there's a long line of people at the microphone, and there's a lot of back and forth. But I think also there's different dimensions of civic engagement. We've received some letters from people with mobility problems or people with scheduling problems, and they'd like to be engaged, but can only do so remotely. I would, I think this is ironically maybe one of the benefits of the pandemic, that the people who couldn't attend before now attend, and we get, I think, overall more participation than we used to. So I would encourage you to take the remote participation.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, could you comment specifically, we're in a unique situation here where we have a facilitator, and Matt does a great job. Going forward, how do you see this for the financial implications for this and other committees where that service, I believe in the past, was being paid for under ARPA? How do we move ahead on this?
Yeah, thank you. So Matt Murphy, thanks for being here again, Matt. Matt's joined us during the pandemic. He was working a lot of meetings then. I don't know that he does more than the select board these days. But he helps out when there's a new committee startup, like the Human Services Committee just started up. Historic District Commission, I think, had some needs. And generally, we have staff support for most boards and committees, and that staff support generally can be the facilitator of a hybrid Zoom. In some cases, they can. In some cases, they can't for various reasons. Not all of our rooms are set up for hybrid. This is one. Downstairs, there are a few, but some of the facilities in other buildings don't have it. We're continuing to work on that. I think if it remains status quo, we could probably manage with Matt Murphy or another resource in terms of how we'd pay for it. It would have to come from the IT budget, and they'd have to make it work.
Well, I will observe, without going into the specifics of this situation, that I know some of the committees, for instance, CPC that I serve on, they would like to have some hybrid meetings, but can't find a room because there's not the infrastructure, I believe. So I think if hybrid meetings are going to continue, I think we need to make sure that that we can move ahead with the physical infrastructure to allow that. And there's one piece of guidance, I guess, for either your capital improvement plan or your operating budget that we're awaiting hearing about it on the 19th.
Yeah, nobody meets here on Friday nights, so this room is available. But yeah, no, I think it's a scheduling thing. I think there are facilities, but most people want to meet on Tuesday nights, so there's only so many. But yes, we'll continue to work on it. I don't want to meet on Friday nights. I was kidding.
Okay, thank you. Comments from the public?
Do it again. Leo Fochman, Wright Terrace. I want to say I agree. You know, one of the things we really need is communication. So if we can get extra people that are calling in from home, great. You know, as far as the school committee, some of the discussion last meeting was, wow, we got parents at home with kids. They can't make it here. Isn't that really important for the school committee? I mean, who do they have? They have parents with kids. Also, we've heard many times before that the DEIC takes no comments. And Mr. Martin has said, well, you can send an email. Well, why can't that be done here then? I'd like some consistency through the different departments. And again, we've heard that, well, the DEIC isn't doing it because of safety reasons. So what I really ask the chair of the DEIC, Zoom meetings are recorded. Can you please somehow get it to us on the meeting at the time scheduled? What was a safety issue? And a safety issue isn't just a difference of opinion. Going back to an old one when we were talking about the DEIC here, had a member of the board say, comments made tonight show that we need a DEIC because there were harmful statements. Well, I met with a couple of people at my house to discuss this. And I asked, give me an example of what was harmful. And basically what I got out of it, and members of the board here that were there can respond if they like, but as we went through the whole thing, what I really got a feeling for was they felt DEIC is very important. It's helpful. So therefore, if you're not for it, you're harmful. And that's the one impression I got. So yeah, we need more communication, but I think we should have it in more places. And at least with DIC, at least maybe public comment, you know, something along those lines. So please, we need more communication. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Joanne Berry, Taylor Road, Town Moderator. First of all, thank you for reconsidering this position of keeping the communication open. I was quite distressed when I heard those comments that you did want to close that off. As we know, everyone cannot attend town meeting. It does have to be in person, and I agree, meetings are better in person. Acton used to be rural too, and it isn't anymore. So we've got a new normal. We have the infrastructure. People are used to it. It's a way for everybody to have a chance. And I'm guessing if we stick with this method, there will be greater and greater capability for greater consistency across the boards. But I think the fact that other boards don't accept comment is no excuse for this board not to accept comment. This is the major board of our town government, and people should have every opportunity that they can to participate. So I encourage you to stick with taking the Zoom comments and, as much as possible, include that, expand the possibility to as many committees as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alyssa Nickel. First of all, I just want to say thank you. I think a hallmark of true leadership is being able to listen to feedback and reconsider, so I really appreciate that, Dean. My comments echo Ms. Berry's. Two wrongs don't make a right. I don't think that we need to discuss the school committee not allowing online comment as a reason for this board not to. Even though it's 2/3 of the budget and this board has oversight over only 1/3, you impact 100% of the town. Your elected officials, of course, the school committee is as well. But you're directing the town manager, and through the town manager, all of the town staff. You're making decisions about policies, issuing permits, and these really significantly impact town residents. As far as the DEIC goes, I'm in support of whatever mode of meeting they need in order to maintain that committee. If there is going to be a slew of DEIC volunteers resigning because the way that they're running the meeting doesn't work for them, that would not be beneficial. The DEIC is an advisory board. They're just, giving this board information and recommendations that do not have to be taken. So I think that again, it's not an equal comparison. And I think that because the infrastructure is here, and the chair mentioned that presenters would still be able to participate remotely. Presenters are attorneys that are representing developers, and I think that if they are allowed remote participation privileges, then you should be allowing citizens and residents of Acton the same courtesy. And it's been incredible, the number of people who have had access, and like Ms. Berry said, it's our new normal.
Thank you.
The only person has to move the microphone down so I could reach Janet Adachi, Simon Hapgood Lane. I don't want to belabor the same points that a number of people have already made. I am glad that you're revisiting the issue of remote participation for audience, especially at the select board meetings. The select boards are elected officials. You're acting at the behest of all of the town members, and I think it's important for you to stay connected with all of the people out there. There are a number of people, not simply people with disabilities, or people who lack transportation, but there are people, there are parents at home dealing with kids they're putting to bed, people who are stuck at work, they're not working from home, they're at the office, and they'd like to say something at the meeting and they can't get here in person. So I think it's, everybody knows that just even if you're doing a personal webinar for your own interest, or you're doing a municipal committee meeting, that attendance jumps up if virtual participation is an option. So I think it's important, if technology and whatnot and the budget allows, to make it available, certainly for this committee and maybe for other committees. I signed up for Room 9 for the hybrid setup. My committee was split on resuming in-person meetings, and we never went and used Room 9, so I canceled it a couple of months ago. But I'm hoping that maybe people will feel a little more comfortable about meeting in person. The other issue I'd like to address quickly is that if you are a municipal committee, even if you're not elected officials, but you're appointed, I feel very strongly that you owe it to the public to allow comments during the meetings, whether they're remote or in person. You are serving the public, and honestly, I believe that you never know where a good idea comes from, and you have to keep your mind open to comments from the public. I know, having sat on this board for 9 years, it can be challenging sometimes to remain patient and cool in the face of comments that may be critical of what you're thinking or doing, but that's part of being an adult and sitting on that board or any municipal committee, where you have to take in all the best ideas and come up with the best actions. So I'm appalled that any committee in the municipality is allowed to have meetings without allowing public comment. I think that's contrary to the interests of the public. And closing off comments altogether, there's a missed opportunity for learning on the audience side and also on the committee member side. And I question whether a committee that doesn't allow public comment should even exist as an official municipal committee. I question whether it can do the job that it's supposed to be doing if it isn't interacting with members of the public live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I had this whole speech written, and everyone else said what I was going to say, including the person before me. But I think more participation means longer meetings for you, and I appreciate that. So I have a couple of suggestions. Perhaps you should limit comments to 2 minutes, just like they do at town meeting. And just like a town meeting, the town moderator sometimes, after a few comments and people say the same thing, she says, does anybody else have something to add that's different? You could also, Mr. Chair, ask if people have said the same thing, ask for show of hands, both in person and on Zoom, who agrees, so that everyone doesn't have to come up here and say, well, I agree with this, and I don't agree with that. So there's a lot of things that you could do to shorten the comments. And by the way, that was on just 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Pat Clifford. I live on Old Barn Way. I am a retired municipal clerk and have some familiarity with what you're dealing with, and I appreciate your patience with all of us. I would like to put a little context on this conversation, which is this option is only in existence for another about 5 or 6 months. It expires the end of March. It's a governor's order. We have a new governor. We may or may not have COVID-19. We may have something else we're dealing with, but in any event, there are a lot of considerations besides how I personally feel. And I would challenge you to put together a working group, a task force, not a committee, not 500 meetings, but a task force who will look at this and help you figure out what happens when the governor's order expires. The last time we went through this, there was actually a period where everything went on freeze, trying to figure out when meetings could be held and so forth. We have a new governor. The open meeting law is actually legislation, and therefore it's not necessarily in the purview of this body or any particular body. It may be the legislators who decide. So there's a lot going on. Clearly it's important to people, somewhat emotional, like many of these things, and I hope you will. I'm going to throw you a lifeline and ask you to put a task force together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ann Chang again, I served with her on a task force for town meeting. I think the open meeting laws, and I think the meetings that have been open to people, the Zoom, the hybrid, and everything else, has helped the community understand government better, and I think that it has had greater participation in government, and I think that that will help in the end to get more participation at town meeting. So I think that you're chopping off your nose to save your face or whatever you're supposed to be doing. But I really think that we should have the community allowed to not only see, hear, and also participate, because I think it's important for people to be educated. I mean, going through Jim's thing tonight, I'm sure that the people that at home didn't even know, many of them didn't even know about the study for the Open Space Committee. And going through the capital plan tonight, I mean, that's the basic thing that people need to know to vote at town meeting. And I really just think you need to continue that. I understand that you're going to put some really ugly stuff on my art walls in the library. I'm willing to do that so you can have more hybrid meetings and have more public participation. So please don't cut it off. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, do we have anyone online?
Yes, Mr. Chair. A couple of hands have gone up and down, so I'm going to call them in the order that I currently see them. And the first one up is Franny Oslam. Franny, you should be able to unmute and speak.
Hi. Yes, I echo many. And I talk about emotions. Yes, I always feel very strong emotions. I get really bored looking at the committee right there. I want to see who's in the room. How many people are there? How many people are standing in line? When I'm on Zoom, I can't have the parking lot discussions or the waiting outside on the stairs or any of that, or going over and tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, I like what they said, or whatever. And it's so easy to do. What I think we should do is either invite all of the Zoom people into the webinar. You can cut them off. Somebody could come and do something terrible and rude and mean in town hall or on Zoom, and we just manage, we manage it as best we can. And I think that we can turn a camera. All you have to do is put a computer in front of Dean right now, turn it around to the whole audience, and then the people on Zoom can see what's happening in the room. And not only that, but there should be a screen in the room that the select board can see and that the audience can see, that can show who's watching from home. We should all be one big group, community in the room. The technology is there. The technology luckily came along from the pandemic, and I think we need to take advantage of it. It gets me so mad that we haven't improved that over this whole time. I mean, after we started driving cars, we didn't go back. Oh, I like the smell of manure. I really like the ruts in the road. I want to go back to horse and buggies. No, we took advantage of the new technology. This technology has, for all the reasons people said, improved things. And yeah, there's some things that aren't perfect. Definitely like being in person with people, but that said, I really want you to consider making it as close to everybody being in the same room as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, Matt.
Deborah Symes. Deborah, you should be able to unmute.
Thanks, Matt. I'm not going to repeat everything because so many good points have been made, but the other thing I do want quickly to add is that COVID is not gone. And, the hybrid option really allows a degree of flexibility and sort of nimbleness in terms of what's going on with people health-wise, people who can't for one reason or another be there. So I just want to sort of make the public health case for continuing hybrids. And I love Franny's idea of making it mimic real life as closely as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Matt.
I believe this is Tara from earlier. They could just confirm and let us know.
This is Tara. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello? Oh, great. Thank you so much. So I agree with basically everybody that spoke from the public, especially Joanne and Alyssa. And I would like to say that maybe Franny with the manure can go along with the gun-toting cowboys and the rural attributes. I agree with Pat. While we hear that remote participation will be extended, I hope Acton works through MMA to propose state legislation to end it, to extend it permanently. Relative to schools, while I think it's not relevant, I will point out that the select board is the only elected body that decides about land use issues all over the town, including sustainability and social justice issues. Yes, the school committee rules on things that are related to the school property and the school operations, but the rest of the town, which I would perhaps say is 80% of the rest of the town, is the select board. I hope you take the lead and show the school committee how to provide more inclusivity. The facilitator in these committee meetings can be a member. It doesn't have to be a staff member. I will say the OSRP, some people view select board as recreation. And the climate plan, by allowing the use of hybrid and commenting, reduces the carbon footprint of the larger town. And the nursing mother, to not let her speak is to suggest her comments are not important. I agree with everything else that's been said from the members of the public. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Matt, do we have anyone else?
Yes, one more hand from Stella Coe. Stella, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, thank you. I thank you for taking the comments to the board, and thank you to all the previous commentators. And I want to give a shout out to Franny. Thank you so much for that suggestion of moving forward with the technology.
Thank you. David.
So I just wanted to clarify something that Ms. Clifford said. So our ability to take input remotely does not expire in April. The legislative acts of 2021, Chapter 20, Section 20, apply to wholly virtual meetings, right? So after April right now, we can't have a wholly virtual meeting. But as far as the members of this board are concerned, we still operate by the old rules. If one of us is remote, first of all, a quorum of us has to be local. If one of us is remote, we read a special statement at the beginning, and we can take input regardless of those acts, even if they didn't exist. So we can take input any way we want to take input. It's just those acts apply to the members of the board.
Thank you. So I think I'll reiterate my initial comments. I think it's important for this board to set a policy to be inclusive in comments, and that policy should apply to all boards and committees that are appointed by the Select Board. Obviously, any policy or practice that we approve would not apply to the Finance Committee because they're appointed by the town moderator, although I would encourage the moderator to follow us. I think it's also important that we communicate with the schools that it appears we'll be taking an affirmative step towards inclusivity, and we hope that they would follow us. So I just think that I'd like to get a sense of the board if they're willing to approve a policy. If we're going to allow remote audience participation for select board meetings, it should also apply to all boards and committees appointed by the select board. David.
So I would not be in favor of such a rule, right? I mean, I've explained this a million times here, and people always come back to the fact, all they say is that we don't allow input in DIC meetings. We did allow input in DIC meetings. We don't now because the members were abused, right? And it was a really small number of people, maybe 3, who would come on for a few weeks in a row and say things which would literally get some members of the committee in tears, right? It's exhausting for them to deal with, right? To say that there is no such thing as racism in Acton again and again and again. That we've never had a problem, with ethnic slurs on our streets again and again and again. That acts in this country like shooting Asian women in Atlanta was not a white supremacist or a racist act again and again. Those things just get exhausting for those members to deal with. I would love to get even counter input on the DEIC, but that's not the way it went, right? It was, people were not making any comments which were constructive. They were saying things that were demonstrably false and attacking people on the committee. I chose as chair at that time, I am no longer chair, to protect the members of the DEIC by not allowing any input. I didn't pick and choose who could talk. I just said there was no input. I invited people every week in my opening statement to send an email to the DEIC, which all the members would read. That's what I chose to do. And, if we adopt a policy here, I think whatever policy that we come up with has to account for abuse of members of a committee. And I'm not talking about myself or anybody on this board. We're elected. If you want to abuse us, you go right ahead. But the people of color and members of certain communities in this town that are on the DEIC do not deserve, those volunteers do not deserve that abuse.
Heminger.
Yeah, I will say, to follow what David said, I know that on the agenda we do have that we clearly listed that we're only talking about remote participation in public meetings, and I think that based on public commenting, it kind of spiraled into another discussion about other boards and committees, and we also just talked about how we do have limited infrastructure. The fact is, not all of our meetings can support hybrid meetings. Not all our rooms can support hybrid meetings. And so by requiring now all of our boards and committees to pursue or to strongly encourage them to do that when we don't have the infrastructure or the resources to support them to make that transition, I think is moving too fast. I think that if we want to be supporting remote participation or hybrid participation for groups, that we're making sure we have enough rooms that can do that, that we're giving them the resources to do that, that we're giving them a heads up that we're doing this, so that we can solicit input. I think that us as a select board can make a decision for our meetings, but to then broaden it now to all of our boards and committees is really fast. And I don't think we've gotten the input that we need for that.
Fran, thank you.
I feel you, Himicha. I feel like we should just talk about our board. I have only seen one other chair refuse public comment, and that was his decision and based on the topic that was being discussed at that moment. It wasn't any new information. It had been heard before at another meeting. So I think that we also need to give chairs of committees their responsibilities. So I'm great with deciding for the select board what we should do in this moment.
Jim?
I mean, I'm in favor of affirming that chairs get to make these decisions, and note that, we have some input for our current chair, which is we would strongly prefer to allow public participation here. But I don't want to try to create a general policy.
Thank you.
Charlie Cadillac, Paul Revere Road. Mr. Martin, there's a simple way to control anybody who wants to make unacceptable comments to the DEIC. The chair controls the microphone. You can also, and I've suggested this in writing, require that people who want to make comments go on a video camera so they can be seen who they are. No big deal, and I'll bet you that would eliminate anybody who's really want to be destructive. Try it. And I also don't believe that the members of the DEIC are so vulnerable, so in need of your protection, that they could not withstand some nasty comments by some idiot that they can simply ignore, which is what everybody else does. So your argument, which I've heard many times, doesn't work. I'm going to repeat, the chair controls the microphone. You don't have to let anybody speak who you know or suspect is going to say things which are hurtful. You can control that. So please, the DEIC would benefit from some public comments. I think they would benefit more than any harm that may come. Try it.
Thank you. So, a couple of comments to Himija. I think the issue of infrastructure insufficiency would only apply to hybrid meetings. We do certainly have a problem. If it's a fully virtual meeting, I don't think we have the problem because it's being administered from people's living rooms or what have you. So I don't feel that the infrastructure is a legitimate concern. Another comment that I heard specifically in justification of the DEIC was, oh, they're only an advisory board. Well, many boards and committees are advisory. And many boards and committees provide input to the select board, which we pretty much accept because we defer to their expertise, and with the assumption that a full and fair hearing and discussion was allowed. I will also point out, and it's a subject for another discussion at some later date, DEIC produces statements which are posted without editing onto the town's website, without oversight by the select board. So I think specifically with the DEIC, but I think it's something it's a potential situation for all boards and committees that are appointed by the select board, is that they're not simply, maybe legalistically they're advisory, but really they're opinion leaders, and really we defer tremendously to their understanding of the issues with the assumption that they have fairly listened to everything. And I think it's important for the select board to fairly listen to the public. And I think it's very important for all boards and committees that are appointed by the select board to live by the same rules. And although I've heard David tell us numerous times about situations of the DEIC, and I'm certainly in sympathy of folks that feel that they've been attacked, but sometimes politics can be a rough business. I'm in favor of continuing allowing remote audience participation at these meetings, and I really ask the board one more time to support me in a policy decision where we would extend that to all boards and committees that are appointed by the select board. I await your comment. Janet.
This is what happens when I don't write down my comments. I forget something. No, what Charlie said, I would agree with wholeheartedly. The chairman, whoever's running the meeting, has a lot of authority to control what happens during the meeting. When I first joined the select board, much younger, not any bigger, and probably maybe bigger, but anyhow, I was the liaison to the West Acton Sewer Advisory Committee, which was people from the same neighborhood who had opposite opinions about whether or not just sewer. So it was ugly. This was a committee where the people were fighting with each other, and then the select board liaison was supposed to be the chairman of this mess. And I went I succeeded Lauren Rosenzweig-Morton, and I went to the first meeting, and it was like I thought they're going to throw fruit at us because all these people in the audience were so badly behaved. And I said, I don't know about Lauren, but I'm not going to put up with this. So I spoke up, and I'm who I am, and I told people, I said, if you're not going to be part of the solution, you're part of the problem, get out, don't come back. And all these leather lungs, these big guys with these big egos, did. A number of them left. The people who remained were quiet and cooperative and adult-like, and it was all because I said, I'm not going to put up with it. You know, you can't abuse the members of this committee. You cannot abuse the health director. You know, they're all sitting there taking pot shots from these jerks in the audience who wanted to just, I don't know, disrupt the meeting and disrupt what they were trying to do. And all it took was me as a liaison to say, cut it out. And I am not a big, forceful person, but if you speak convincingly with authority, people will listen. And if worst comes to worst, I always remembered when I was on the select board, if people are really out of control, call the police and they will escort the troublemakers out, okay? It never came to that at any point during my 9 years. But it was always at the back of my mind that the chairman and all of us collectively on the select board had a lot of power. And if we use it, we can maintain control. So I honestly, David, I didn't hear the DEIC discussions, but, you know, I really would urge you, or urge the people whoever's the chairman, to consider resuming public comment acceptance. Notify me. I will get people to plant ourselves in the audience. And if somebody starts acting out and you're not, or whoever isn't able to control, a number of us will speak up and tell them to shut up, you know? And you know, just try it, because I think that the DEIC has a role to play, but the topic they're talking about is not going to make any progress in this town if people can't have civil discussion. The people that you say were making comments were obviously like the leather lungs at the meeting that I had to weigh in on. And it does, if you're forceful enough, it works, okay? So maybe somebody else, some other small person who's not white on your committee can do that job. But I just say, don't give up. You can control it. You have a lot of power in your hands if you're the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
So thank you, everybody. I appreciate, frankly, it bothers me not to take public input. Right? You may not believe that, but it really bothers me not to take public input. You know, we come from a town that where we have a tradition of public input. We had an earnest discussion, I think, in our June meeting and the whole DEIC, and decided to leave our current policy in place. I do understand where people are coming from. It's a little bit different for the DEIC than Janet, as you know, I also chair the sewer committee. There are people that are really against sewers, so that's completely fine. But it's a little bit different when people are challenging basic things associated with who you are, right? And which is what the DEIC deals with, right? You know, challenging someone over sewers is not the same as challenging whether or not they've encountered racism in the town. And they're fundamentally different. I'm sure we'll get back to public input at some point, and I appreciate that, you know, we could cut somebody off. You know, even that's problematic, though, because I know who I'm going to have to cut off, right? I know who I'm going to, but that's kind of unfair of me, right? What I do, allow this person to make 3 words and then I cut them off. You know, that's not going to win me any popularity contests either, right? So it's a tough call. I mean, I really understand. And I suspect that the DEIC will allow public input again. And I'll encourage the commission to take up a discussion again soon as to whether we should allow it.
Leo Fochman, Wright Terrace. One thing I'd like people to view, if they haven't, the last school committee meeting had 24 minutes and 18 seconds. Peter Light, the superintendent, came up and gave a really nice discussion. Number one, he talked about how empathy is being redefined. So in other words, it's not, I can no longer say I can walk in somebody else's shoes. We all understand that. But what it says is each side has to listen deeply to what the other side says. And the whole thing with the DEIC is they're not listening to other viewpoints. And again, Mr. Martin, I'm going to ask you one more time. please get back to me on all the different meetings I viewed, and for the help of the town, I viewed about 12 Zoom meetings for the DEIC. Not once have I heard somebody say, racism doesn't exist. What I've heard is, racism exists everywhere. The difference is, we don't consider ourselves a racist town. And because of all the support that a lot of people get, that we do for people around here, I mean, it's true. We have a good town. So people like me get insulted when I'm told just because I say I'm not a racist, that means I am. You know, I'm part of the Human Services Committee with Fran, and what we're there to do is help everybody, all right? And listen to all different comments. So, Mr. Martin, please, I need some evidence from you about somebody saying there's no racism, it doesn't exist. I haven't heard that before, all right? The meeting, which meeting was it? And I'll request the Zoom meeting and watch it. And if I can hear that exact words, I'll apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, last comment, thank you.
Thank you, Scott Smyers. Just, the remote participation is certainly valuable. I heard a lot of good points, in a lot of ways. But there's got to be guardrails. I hear that too, right? The two committees that we're talking about, one, the school committee that said we don't want any more remote participation at all, okay? Then you got the DEIC saying we don't want any participation, from the public, right? With email, you can send us an email and they can ignore it if they want. But both of these committees, the school committee, used the remote format to their advantage to push their political agenda 2 years ago. That was quite clear. So this can get out of control when you can't face people face to face, right? It's a lot more difficult to have disagreements when you're standing across from another human being that you may have a different type of relationship with outside of that particular scenario. But when you're remote, we all know that barrier goes away. So more can get done. They push their agenda, they're still pushing their agenda, and they're not happy now because there's a lot of people showing up at the school committee meetings and they'd have even more calling in. Then that would be, it would slow things down. Then on the other hand, you have the DEIC that a lot of people in town think is just, it's an illegitimate committee because it doesn't allow any participation from the public. So what could they possibly be doing in there that can't be transparent enough that we can see it? And so if you're going to have remote participation, there needs to be some sort of guardrails to make it as free and fair for everyone. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Fran, please.
So you're able to get onto a DEIC meeting and view it, and it's just input from the public. Yeah, so it's not that they're disregarding people from attending a DEIC meeting. I think at our last meeting, even though I love the idea of virtual input, I think it's super important. I think the way the decision was arrived was that it was just Dean making a decision, and I would like the board as the 5 members to make a decision. I think that's how this board operates. I really feel strongly for subsequent boards for their chairs to make the best decisions for their own committees. So I'd like us to make a decision as a board.
Well, I will offer a motion. I would move that through the end of the term of this board, which will end somewhere around May 16th, 2023, after town meeting, that we continue to allow remote audience participation, and that we require it of all boards and committees that have been appointed by the select board. I'd look for a second on that.
Can I make a suggestion?
Please.
Yes, so in that motion, I think there are two very clear themes. One is allowing remote participation for our select board to continue until, like you said, May 16th, 2023. I think the other aspect of that was whether we require it for all other boards and committees, which I think, well, for me personally, two very different things, and I would have different votes on them. So maybe what we do is we separate those votes, or we separate those motions, we go through that round as a board and see how we vote. That would be my recommendation.
Other comments?
I would be, thank you, Hemaj. I think that sounds great.
Very well. I will move that this board, select board, requires that all boards and committees appointed by the select board accept remote public participation. Look for a second.
For the purpose of discussion, I'd be happy to second that.
Thank you. Discussion.
I think it's already been said, but just now that we have a specific motion, I'm in favor of having this choice be the purview of committee chairs. I think it's good to have discussions about it. I thought it was I appreciated, David, hearing from you about, your struggles and your interests in getting that going again. So I think it's good to talk about it, but I don't think it's good to impose a policy.
Further discussion. David?
I'll definitely vote no on this. And I agree with Jim that it needs to be, up to the chair. And, I'm not ignoring people's input, right? As I mentioned, we had a discussion, I think, in the IC June meeting about this, and the commission as a whole decided to keep the policy in place the way we had it. And as I said here tonight, I think we'll probably change it at some point just to allow public participation again.
Fran?
So the difference of being elected and appointed, I think, is huge. And I think as an elected select board member, our job is to hear from as many constituents and citizens as we can. And that I think the two need to be separated.
Very well. We have a motion, and it's been seconded. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions? Thank you. I would await a second motion. Jim?
I would vote that we recommend to the chair that he keep public participation, virtual public participation open during the length of his chairmanship.
I'll second that. May I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I like the way that, Jim, you phrased that. It's a recommendation to the chair. I think, as we said, it's kind of the chair's call. And, Dean heard a lot of input tonight from us and from others, and also via email. And so I think it's something for us to encourage, but I think it's Dean's call.
Him and Jim.
I would just add a friendly amendment that it's a recommendation to the chair that virtual participation for select board meetings remain open.
Accepted on my half. Does that work for you, David?
I'll accept the second.
Thank you. Would you read the motion one more time, please?
Yes. So I have that we, I don't, Jim, you might be moved, but we move that we recommend to the chair that virtual participation for select board meetings remain open until the end of our select board term, if we want to be specific, in May 2023.
Thank you. All right. Motion moved and seconded. let's go for a vote. All in favor of the motion as read, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much. I appreciate the input from my colleagues on the board and certainly the public. Certainly take that recommendation under consideration, and you'll be hearing back shortly. Thank you. So, now the real fun part of being chair. Approved 2023 licenses issued by the Select Board. Big drink of water before I start. I move that we approve the license to expose, keep for sale, and to sell all kinds of alcoholic beverages to be drunk on premises as listed in the Renewal Master List, Section 12. This is a permit is $5,000. Seventh Settlement South, LLC. Chalk D in King, Incorporated. The next one on the list is Concord Brewery, LLC, but I'm going to hold that one. El Hupil Acton Restaurant Corporation. Philo's Great Road. Frolic and Detour Incorporated, also on the list, also to be held. Great Road Seafood Sales. Indoor Sports Management. Jaman Corporation. Leaf Hat Incorporated. Not Your Average Joe's. Poe's Barbecue. Quail Ridge Country Club. RFG Golf. Next on the list is Roundtable Entertainment. That one is also held. Santa Fe Burrito. And Yang and Zhang Incorporated. Would someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion? The one point that I will make in the discussion is that there are still some issues to be worked out with several of these establishments, which is why they're being held. They're being held without prejudice at this point. Further comment?
So just to be clear, this motion applies to all the businesses that you read that you didn't hold?
Yes, that's correct. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. It's approved. Next.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a point of order. These are for, the ones that you held are not for later tonight, they're for another meeting?
They'll be for a subsequent meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I move we approve retail packaged goods store licenses to expose, keep for sale, and to sell all kinds of alcoholic beverages not to be drunk on premises as listed in the Master Renewal List, Section 15. These are $2,000 licenses. Albee Corporation. Elm Associates Incorporated. Pramuk Mahant Krupa Corporation. Acton Liquor Corporation. Vasudev Incorporated. Would someone care to make that motion?
Oh, so moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor of the motion as read, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. I move we approve the retail packaged goods store license to expose, keep for sale, and to sell wines and malt beverages not to be drunk on premises as listed on the Master Renewal List, Section 15. These are $1,500 licenses. Chalky Corporation. Donlands Supermarket. Idlewild Farm Incorporated. RBSBW. and Eve and Murray's.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Next, I move we approve the common victular license to expose, keep for sale, and to sell wines and malts to be drunk on premise as listed in the master renewal list, section 15. It's a $2,000 license. Bueno Acton, Acton Bolodrome, Squash West, New London Style Pizza, Twin Seafood of Acton. That's it. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say abstentions. That's approved. Next, I move we approve the Class 2 used car licenses as listed in the master renewal list. These are $100 licenses. Acton Auto Boutique, Acton Family Automotive, Acton Gas, Alpha Cars and Ural of New England, Carvana, J. Scott Motors, J. Stackhouse Enterprises, Wholesale Auto Sales, Inc., Mildam Leasing Company, Inc., Mildam Leasing Company, Inc., Northeast Collections, Inc., New Garage, LLC, Northeast Collection, these are two separate locations. Fifth Element. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. I move to approve the Class 1 new car licenses as listed on the master renewal list. These are $100 licenses. Acton Ford, Inc., Acton Lincoln Mercury, Inc., Alpha Cars and Ural of New England, Eric Gilfax, Gordon Chevrolet, McGovern Subaru of Acton, Swanson Buick GMC Truck Incorporated. I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Next up, I move to approve the entertainment license listed in the master renewal list. There's one listed, Frolic and Detour, and same situation as earlier. This will come back at a subsequent meeting. We'll pass over that one. And there's no other business under that category. Next, I move we renew bowling alley and billiard table licenses listed in the master renewal list. $10 per alley, $10 per table. Acton Bolodrome.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. I move to approve the 24-hour permit as listed on the master renewal list, $1,500 license. CVS.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Sorry for that. For the Frolic and Detour entertainment license, did we actually go through, like, someone moving, seconding, and voting?
We did not. That's the only issue under that category, the only license under that category, so we passed over it. It'll be held. And come back 2 weeks, hopefully.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. I move we approve the automatic amusement devices as listed in the master renewal list, $100 per machine.
So moved.
Wait, there's more.
Oh, that's sorry. Never mind.
Indoor Sports Management, Inc., and Acton Bowlerdrome, now.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded, discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. We're getting close.
This is the longest one.
Yeah. I move to approve the following common victual licenses as listed in the master renewal list. This is $100. Seventh Settlement South LLC, Acton Coffee House, Acton House of Pizza, Acton Indoor Sports, Acton Seafood Sales, AP Pizzeria, Bagels Plus, Beijing Tokyo, Benjerong Restaurant, Blackbird Cafe, Bueno Isano, Burgerdrome, Crossroads Cafe, DeCapri Pizzeria, Donlands Supermarket, Dunkin' Donuts at Powder Mill Plaza, Dunkin' Donuts 315 Main Street, Dunkin' Donuts 182 Great Road, El Hupil Acton Restaurant, Philo's Great Road, Frolic and Detour, we will hold on that one, Ginger Court, Junior's Pizza, Legend Cafe, McDonald's, New London Style Pizza, Not Your Average Joe's, Quail Ridge Country Club, Rapscallion Table to Tap, we'll hold on that one, Sorrento's Pizzeria, Spice Pepper Garden, Starbucks Mass Ave, Subway 134 Great Road, Subway 255 Main Street, Twin Seafood. Have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
We were singing the praises of KJ Cafe earlier tonight. Wouldn't they need a common vittler's license? Oh. Okay. Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Imogen.
Thank you. Just a quick question. For those that we put on hold, is it also just that we're working out some internal logistics with them and then we'll come back, or?
So, just to clarify, so for every, particularly for the liquor license, but for all the renewals, there are due diligence that staff does to ensure that they're meeting all the obligations of the license. And in the case of, I believe, 4 businesses, they had either not completed to the building commissioner's satisfaction the things that he had asked them to do, or I think that's primarily the issue.
Thank you. David.
So I noticed that Round Table, which is Holy Grail, is not listed in the common vittler's licenses. So that can also be brought up in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion as read, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. I will read through the consent items. Item 12, approve release of executive session minutes 2015 to 2019. Approve meeting minutes November 7th, 2022. Approve executive session minutes November 7th and 21, 2022. 15, approve Mike Gowing, Susan Peterman, and Ann Cadlick as full members to the 250 committee, terms to expire September 30th, 2026.
I'd like to hold that.
16, approve Mary Price Maddox as a full member to the 250 committee as representative from the Acton Boxborough School District, term to expire September 30th, 2026.
I'd like to hold that as well, please.
Approve Ken Appel as a full member to the Land Stewardship Committee, term to expire June 30th, 2025. Approve James Fuscione as an associate member of the Planning Board, term to expire June 30th, 2027.
I'll hold that.
Approve Jeff Burgart as a full member to the Human Services Committee as the Council on Aging Board Representative, term to expire June 30th, 2025. Approve Mark Conaby as a full member to the Human Services Committee as the Board of Health Representative, term to expire June 30th, 2025. Approve Franny Osmond as a full member to the Human Services Committee as the Commission on Disabilities Representative, term to expire June 30th, 2025. Approve Hema Santharakrishnan as a full member to the Human Services Committee as the Recreation Commission Representative, term to expire June 30th, 2025. Approve Karen O'Neill as an associate member to the Open Space Committee, term to expire June 30th, 2025.
I'd like to hold that, please.
Approve letter of support for the 495/Metro West Partnership FY23 redo application and verification of municipal service area. Authorize town manager to execute letter of intent and power purchase agreement for solar canopy project at the public safety facility. Approve Elizabeth White Fund recipients. Approve 2022-2023 private way plowing recommendations. I will accept a motion to accept consent items 12 through 14, 17, 19 through 22, and 24 through 27.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of those consent items, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. To the held items, item 15.
So I would like to hold items, not act on items 15 and 16 tonight until we come back and discuss the other matter around involving someone already appointed to the 250 committee. And so maybe they can be added in the consent item and whatever that person comes back to speak to us.
Comments from other members of the board? Imager.
Thank you. Yes, I think that, having this on a future agenda so that we can talk about it as was proposed earlier makes sense.
David, I think that you have inadvertently slurred the 4 people who have volunteered and come forth. I'm sure that that was not your intent, but I frankly am resentful of the fact that you are apparently holding the rest of the committee hostage and holding the committee hostage, keeping them from doing the work that we hope to get started, so that you can make your point about one person whom you voted for 2 weeks ago. And I would make note of the fact that when other committees in the past have been proposed, after people have been vetted by the VCC and the liaison to the committee, I don't think I've ever seen a situation where there's been a wholesale stop on all approvals of those committee members.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I'll make it easy for you.
Mr. Catholic.
Mr. Martin, you have to name the people that you wish to hold back. Will you motion name them, please?
I don't have to name them. I just held the 2 consent items.
Please be advised that I'm going to be filing a complaint under the open meeting law.
Thank you. So, Discussion from other members regarding items 15 and 16. And I would also point out the fact that item 16 was specifically authorized and sent to us by the school superintendent, so vetted repeatedly. Is that your intention to personally attack these individuals?
I certainly did not personally attack anybody. I'm just asking for deferred action on these two items. And, you know, I'll point out again that the social media post from the person in question.
We're not discussing that person.
You just mentioned that, Mr. Chair. You just mentioned him. You said I was holding him hostage for this person that I wanted to stop that I had already approved. You just said that I approved 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks ago, I didn't know about his social media posts. His social media posts advocating the overthrow of the United States government and military action against the United States. I'd like to ask him about those. Maybe they were jokes in bad taste, or something. But I think we need to get to the bottom of that. I just think it's important. I think proceeding ahead with the 250 committee before we resolve that is important.
So you are conflating a former select board member, an interested individual who lives in Acton Center, and Cadillac, who has served the town well as a clerk and teller, and a respected faculty member of the Acton-Boxborough School District. You have conflated those people with somebody that you do not approve of their social media posts, just to get that clear and on the record?
To make it clear again, I'm not conflating anything. I'm just asking for deferred action on these two items until after we discuss that individual who's already been appointed.
So if you're not conflating, why are you holding?
Because I don't think we should move forward with the 250 committee until this is resolved. It's just important to me. I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't think we should move forward with the 250 committee until we've resolved this issue.
I can certainly understand although it is unprecedented, that we come back and re-examine an appointee, but to hold all the other members of the committee hostage to your desire to make a point, I think is not an appropriate move for a member of this board or a member of this committee or a member of this community.
Mr. Chair, I am not attacking anyone. I am just...
Yes, you are.
I did not. I am only asking
By implication, you're attacking 4 members of the public in their absence.
Mr. Chair, that's your interpretation. I have said explicitly now 3 times that I am not attacking these individuals. I have nothing against these individuals. I just think we need to resolve this other matter before we need to move forward with the 250 committee.
Mr. Martin, I can remember a discussion which was less adversarial than this when you were advocating members to go on the DEIC. And I remember how emotional you got when you thought that you were being attacked, which you were not. And that might explain the emotion you see on me at this point. I think what you are attempting to do here brings this board and you personally into disrepute. Jim.
I just wanted to interrupt the back and forth. It didn't seem like it was going anywhere. So what will I interrupt it with? I think we're only talking about a brief pause. Well, hopefully we'll have this on the agenda later in December at our next, when is our next meeting? It was our next meeting? 19th, yeah. So I think it's not a big delay. So I'm fine with waiting. And I certainly have nothing against Mike Gowing, Suzanne Peterman, Ann Cadillac, or Mary Price Maddox. It's just a matter of wanting to make sure we understand the makeup of the committee before we approve its almost final members. I think this will fill this up. We'll have one full membership left and some associate memberships left.
Very well. Mr. Martin has moved that we hold these two items, 15 and 16. All in favor of Mr. Martin's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Abstentions? I will state at this point that I am incredibly disappointed in my colleagues. Item 18.
James Fuccione should be definitely on the planning board. This is not an attempt to stop that. This is to deal with the fact that Ray Jacoby, who's longtime member of the planning board, frequently its chair, recently announced his resignation. And I'm thanking him for all his service. But now we're in a situation where it would be smarter, after consulting with the planning department, considering James Fuccione's extensive experience, to appoint him directly to be a full member of the planning board rather than an associate member. It'd be the same term.
Imager.
Sorry, Jim, a quick question. So for the planning board, is there a vacancy that you can promote someone to be a full member for the planning board?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would suggest we hold this until the 19th, because the agenda clearly states associate member.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I took it off the consent, so we could consider a change to it.
Okay, further discussion. All in favor of holding item 18 until December 19th, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Item 23.
23 is a similar issue to 18. Someone on the Open Space Committee who is a full member resigned this weekend, and so I would like to change Karen O'Neill to be a full member.
Okay. Again, I think we should roll that until the 19th, since the agenda clearly states associate member. All in favor of holding that until December 19th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. I will entertain one more motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.